Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto drops the act bashing naruhina. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by FlameXFullmetal and link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. Explanations. To anyone else, this was a typical night with the festival running smoothly and the village moving around animatedly. However, for one boy it was the night that would change everything. He was running for his life. He never understood why the villagers hated him and why they tried to act like he didn't exist. He didn't understand why a small group would attack whenever this time of year came along. All he could think of was that the alcohol that they consumed made them hallucinate. He couldn't possibly be the Kyuubi like they always called him, could he? He knew that he wasn't supposed to leave his house that night, but he had really wanted to see what all the lights were about. Tripping on a stone, he quickly pulled himself to his feet and began running once again. If he could get back to his home he would be safe. Glancing up ahead he grinned slightly and darted into an alley that he knew had a loose board in the back fence. Granted he would have to go the long way around to his apartment, but he would lose them. It escaped again. The leader growled. It wasn't the first time that he had tried to corner the brat. However, he always managed to slip free. He had hoped to catch the demon and get revenge for his wife who had died when it attacked, but it seemed he would have to wait again. He knew that many believed the brat to be an innocent human, but he also knew of a select group that hated him just as much. The scars from their losses ran deep, and the knowledge that the demon was still alive was an insult to the memory of all the ones that had died that day. As the blonde slipped out on the other side of the fence, he groaned as he noticed that he had cut his leg. It wasn't unusual, but he also knew that it would slow him down into jutsu, and they had a test tomorrow. He slowly made his way through the overgrown grass and began to make his way back to his apartment. The orphanage hadn't wanted to take care of him, so he had eventually gotten an apartment of his own. The Sandaime came by once a month with money for expenses, but sometimes he wanted to scream that it wasn't enough. Trying to manage his money when he had no idea of how to cook or what food to buy oftentimes made him buy things he didn't need or that would go bad in the refrigerator. So he often stuck to buying instant ramen. He knew that it wasn't good for him, but it was the only thing that he knew how to make, and cookbooks were just not possible with him having to buy new clothes every so often to replace the ones that got damaged and buy new school supplies all the time. He couldn't get the same gear that everyone else in his class could because he was living on a very strict budget, so he had to sometimes make do with subpar equipment. While Naruto had taken this path many times before, he had always done it during the day and he had always been able to see where he was going. So he had no idea that he had veered off course and was heading for a steep decline. He had been too caught up in his thoughts to notice that the fences had gotten so much further away. He knew he was in trouble, however, when his foot slipped out from under him and he went sliding down the incline before he flipped from crashing into a rock. Tumbling down now, he felt a number of impacts that just felt more painful than they probably should be. He knew that he would not only have bruises but perhaps a broken bone or two as well. He didn't remember the rest of the trip, however, as his world went black around him. He did remember waking up in a sewer. How he got there he had no idea. It was then that Naruto heard someone speak to him. Looking around, he passed it off as his imagination until it came again. This time it was more audible and Naruto felt himself growing angrier at the voice that dared mock him. "Who's there?" he demanded. The voice laughed and let out a growl. "Do not demand my name, mortal. But if you wish to know, then come and find me if you can." Shivering, Naruto turned and began to head down the dark hallway, attempting to find the source of the noise. Following the slight noises that he heard every now and again, he soon found himself in front of a huge cage with a tag bearing the kanji for seal on it. Peering through the gate, he gasped as he caught sight of the 9 blood-red tails swinging behind the massive fox in front of him. "You are the Kyuubi," he gasped out. "You're correct, foolish mortal. Now, what do I owe the pleasure of this visit? I found this place by accident," Naruto said in a timid voice. Swaying, he grabbed the wall to steady himself. "You can't even stay on your feet. How pathetic. Well, excuse me for falling down a really big hill," he shouted petulantly. "I will not allow such a pathetic vessel. You can't even stand because of a little fall. What did I do to deserve such an undeserving host?" The Kyuubi roared in anger. It couldn't believe the audacity of this mortal. The demon's last vessel wasn't that bad and the first had actually talked with him frequently. This vessel, however, he would not allow himself to remain in such a weak human like a common low-class demon. Glaring at the human, he tried to weigh his options. He could not control the boy and he knew that manipulating him would be next to impossible. Shaking his head, he smirked as a plan entered his mind. The boy was alone outside and had only the Hokage for support, so if he could gain his trust, maybe the boy would let him out of his own free will. However, he would not make it easy. Jolting awake in bed, Naruto looked around and tried to remember how he had gotten back to his place. The last thing he remembered was meeting the fox. He had some inkling that the reason he was hated in the village had something to do with the fox. Despite not knowing everything, he had been the only child born the night of the Kyuubi attack and the only one treated like an outcast. He had never expected to find the demon in his own body though. That had cleared up a lot. Closing his eyes, he slipped into the meditative position that the Hokage had taught him a few days earlier and after many failed attempts, managed to find his way back to the fox's cage. "Kyuubi, can we talk?" he called out in front of the cage. "What would we have to discuss after last night?" the demon roared. Flinching at the harsh tone, the boy lowered his head and gave a slight bow. "I'm sorry. I didn't know that you were here and I guess that I could have done more not to insult you by falling behind everyone else in my class. I promise that I will try harder," he whispered to the demon in front of him. Freezing, the ancient demon glared at the youth before him. "Did you just apologize?" The fox couldn't believe his ears. A human had just apologized to him for being, well, human. Nodding, Naruto dared not lift his head for fear that the fox would not forgive him. Then he heard the sound of laughter. "Very well. I accept. You are the first human that has ever apologized to me. Therefore, I will allow one question to be asked by you that I will answer with all honesty. Think carefully, for this will be the last time that I offer this." Naruto raised his head and then tilted it in confusion before nodding to himself. "Okay then, why did you attack Konoha?" The question took Kyuubi by surprise. "It is a long story and I will not accept any questions or interruptions. Do you understand?" Nodding, Naruto sat down and began listening to the Kyuubi's words. It was that explanation that began the fox's plan. However, not even the fox could predict just how unpredictable the blonde truly was. Then one day Naruto asked the question that would change him forever. "Kyuubi, I was wondering, since you do not want a weak vessel and I am obviously not getting the training that I need at the academy and am still falling behind my classmates, will you train me?" The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Kyuubi had found himself enjoying the human's company as he was interested in learning as much as he could. However, to train the human was another story. "On one condition. You must agree to find a way to release me from this infernal seal." The demon negotiated. After thinking it over, Naruto nodded and smiled at the demon enthusiastically. They agreed that they would start his training from the very beginning, and the fox quickly noticed several problems with his existing education. He decided that he would put up with the human for as long as he could until the day he would be released once again. At the very least, his vessel would be able to stand up to the other Jinchuriki and he would retain his status as the strongest. Despite that, he vowed to be very harsh with the boy. He may be biding his time, but that did not mean that he was going to accept the human child as his equal. He was only doing this for the freedom that came from the deal. TBC, parental love. "Now, before we continue on our lessons, we are going to test how well you can keep awareness of your surroundings while meditating," Kyuubi instructed. Nodding, the 8-year-old dropped to the forest floor and began to clear his mind. Kyuubi had been an apt but harsh instructor and had taken him farther than he had ever hoped to go alone. He had not only caught up with his class, but had also surpassed them. He knew that he was trying to get loose, and at the same time he knew that the fox was also starting to like him. Focusing on his surroundings, he opened his eyes and stood as he caught the presence of 2 other chakra sources in his mind. They were faint, but they were there. "Kyuubi-sensei, there are other chakra sources in my mind. How come?" This seemed to perplex the demon as it too sent out its chakra to locate them. "I know these chakra signals," Kyuubi said. "Who is it?" "I can't say now, but I want to find them first to see how they are here. You might want to go back out, lunch is over." "Yes, sensei." Naruto chirped and then headed back to the outside realm. Opening his eyes, he found Iruka looking at him. While they had only just met, Naruto got a distinct feeling that the Chunin didn't like him. "Was there something that you needed, Iruka-sensei?" Naruto asked politely. "I asked for everyone to come back to the classroom and you were sleeping," Iruka chastised. "Sorry, sensei. I'll head back in now," he said with a faked smile. "Naruto, why are you even here? You spend more time goofing off than studying, you sleep through class, and you aren't even trying to perfect your kunai and shuriken techniques," he asked as Naruto walked past him. Stopping in his tracks, he let his mask down a little. "If I left, then it would give people that don't want me here the satisfaction of seeing me quit, wouldn't it? Besides, I can't be Hokage if I am not a shinobi first, now can I?" he answered with a cold voice and then bounded inside. Iruka was left trying to figure out what just happened. Shaking his head, he headed inside and began his lecture. He didn't want to think of the demon that killed his parents as a lonely child. He refused to think of him that way. It was getting more and more difficult for Naruto to pay attention in the boring class, and he knew that he was going to have to try. Kyuubi-sensei had covered this already, and he didn't want to drop the mask yet. He had put it up for safety reasons. He knew that one day it would have to come off, but he hoped that he would be able to ease it off of himself and slowly allow his abilities to show. It was because of this that he had been formulating a plan in his head concerning when and where he would take it off. Shaking his head he glanced up at the chalkboard and groaned. There was still an hour left of class. Looking around he could see that the rest of the students were also having difficulties staying awake. The civilians had spent a good majority of the past 3 years complaining that their children couldn't pass because the curriculum was too difficult and designed for those that had already started their training prior to entering the academy, children who were born in the shinobi clans, in other words. They had even gone as far as launching a petition, and the elders had backed them up. They had made a valid point, and because of it, the Sandaime had had no choice but to approve of the curriculum change, as they no longer needed to train the children for war. So the academy was now restricted to teaching history, math, basic taijutsu, working on their target practice, and teaching 3 very low-level techniques. Sadly the level had been lowered so much it was barely above civilian level. Far lower than even necessary for the demilitarization agreed upon at the end of the last war. Kyuubi had said that this complacency with peace was going to get them all killed and that they would not be ready should a war break out. Naruto had to admit that he agreed with them. It was then that he realized he had spaced out for over an hour and that the class had already left. Briskly walking home he entered his apartment and locked the door. The last thing that he needed was someone walking in and thinking that he was trying to hatch a plot to kill the whole village. Dropping onto his bed he entered a meditative position and slipped quickly into his mindscape. He had hoped that Kyuubi would continue working on his Fuinjutsu today and was eagerly awaiting Kyuubi's arrival. It was then that he noticed that something was off about his mind. It felt colder for some reason. Following the draft, he soon found himself in an entirely different place. In it, Naruto saw himself staring death in the face. Almost literally. In front of him were the Shinigami summoning and the Kyuubi who seemed squared off for some reason. "You will not have what is left of their souls," Kyuubi growled at the transparent being. "Move aside. Minato gave his soul to me, and I find it an insult for a part of it to be in here." It growled at the fox. "Never." He growled right back. "Kyuubi-sensei?" Naruto asked hesitantly. Both beings turned to look at the young boy and Kyuubi cursed. "Naruto, leave. Go back to the outside world now." "No, let him stay." The Shinigami sneered. "What's going on?" Naruto demanded. "Nothing you need to worry about, young ninja. It is my head. If you two decide to fight in here then I will be the one that pays the price. So if you want to stay you will explain everything to me and I will decide what happens, damn it." Naruto yelled. He didn't mean to snap, but the death deity rubbed him the wrong way. Turning, Kyuubi couldn't help but smirk as his vessel bravely stood up against the death deity. "Your parents left a bit of their chakra in your seal in order to help you if you needed it. However, as soon as I found them this bozo demanded that I turn over your father's soul fragment." Kyuubi hissed. "It is rightfully mine. Is there any way that I can keep them?" Naruto asked, hoping for a chance to meet his parents. Tilting his head, the Shinigami appeared to contemplate the question before saying plainly, "No. Surely there is something that you want more than dad." Naruto pleaded. That made the Shinigami stop and actually contemplate the human's words. "There is, but I doubt that I will be able to get it from you." "What is it?" "The souls of the 4 who escaped death. If you can vow to give them to me then I will not only let them stay, I will return their souls to you. Upon the first soul, I will resurrect them. That will be our collateral. If you do not give me the other 3 then I will take them both as well as your own." "Deal?" the Shinigami asked honestly. "Who are the 4? A nin named Haiden, one named Kakuzu, the snake Orochimaru and the traitor Madara Uchiha." Both the demon and the vessel perked up. That they could do. Naruto had vowed to help Kyuubi get his revenge on Madara already, and Orochimaru was already a wanted nuke nin. "What if I am not the one that kills them? As long as you are near enough it will work." "Deal?" Nodding, the Shinigami faded from view and 2 other beings came into view as the mindscape returned to its previous condition. Sighing in relief that the warmth was back, Naruto leaned against a tree and observed the 2 in front of them. The one he knew was the Yondaime Hokage and the other was familiar. He knew that he should know who she was, but for the life of him, he could not place a name. "Minato? What happened? I do not feel a need for us to be out here yet. Surely the seal couldn't have broke." "I don't think that is it." Kushina turns around. Minato said as he caught sight of both Naruto and the Kyuubi standing side by side. "That's it. Kushina Uzumaki, the Red Death of Konoha. I knew I had seen her before. Iruka-sensei just covered her in class last week." Naruto exclaimed out loud and then sank to the ground. "Wait, if you are here and my parents were supposed to have left chakra in me then that means..." Naruto trailed off as he lost consciousness. Kyuubi shook his head and lay down next to him. He had to admit that the boy had started to grow on him. Granted, he had some selfish reasons for wanting to keep the soul fragments. He had seen the Yondaime use his techniques plenty of times from inside of Kushina, however, how they worked and teaching them was another story. "Well, are you going to stare or are you going to ask me questions?" Kyuubi demanded. That shook the 2 from their daze as they began to stammer. "How? Why? What?" were the only coherent things that they managed to get out. "Naruto likes me." Too bad Yondaime-chan. Kyuubi sing-songed. Just as the Yondaime was getting into a fighting position, Naruto stood up and looked around. His eyes settled on the two before him before he growled. "How many times do I have to tell people that there is no fighting in my head?" he yelled. Blinking, the Yondaime relaxed and sighed. "Oh good, I thought that the seal had failed and that we were somehow outside. Not yet. I intend to let Kyuubi out eventually and you two will be resurrected soon. Well, as soon as I fulfill my end of the deal anyway." After pausing for a second, he tilted his head. "Are you two really my parents?" That made both of them and Kyuubi stare before beginning to chuckle. "We are Naruto," Kushina whispered while trying not to break into full-blown laughter. "Cool. The two coolest shinobi in the world are my parents. This is so cool. My dad was the Yondaime." Naruto yelled gleefully as he began a little victory dance. Shaking his head in exasperation, Kyuubi turned his attention to the two baffled nin. "Naruto has been aware of my presence for a few years now. I have been training him on the condition that he release me from the seal one day." He agreed. "Unfortunately, it appears that we still need to work on his hyperactivity and emotional outbursts. You should thank me, you know. If I hadn't taught him to be more rational in his thinking, he probably would have punched you just now. As it is, he just now made a deal with the Shinigami to resurrect the two of you when the first of 4 nuke nin are killed. Upon the death of the other 3, your resurrection will be permanent. Any questions?" "Why would he agree to release you?" Minato growled. "Because I really like Kyuubi-sensei. He's nice and knows a lot of things, and he was being controlled back then, so he really didn't mean to attack Konoha," Naruto said breathlessly. Sitting next to the demon fox, he grinned. "Can we work on some more Fuinjutsu today, Kyuubi?" "Brat. I told you last time that I had already taught you as much as I knew. Ask those two." He growled, nodding his head to the two nin in front of him. "Please. Mom, Dad. Pretty please." He begged enthusiastically. Laughing at his antics, Minato agreed. Sitting forward, him and Naruto began to review what he already knew as he listened in on Kyuubi as he informed them about Naruto's life to that point. DBC, cracking the mask, he wasn't stupid. He knew that the nine-tailed fox was sealed inside of him. He had even met the fox. Hell, he had even met his parents too. Despite popular belief, he was aware of most everything that went on in his life. He knew that the shy Hyuga girl liked him, but he never acknowledged her in order to protect her from her own clan. The Hyuga were some of his more annoying enemies. He knew that Sakura would never like him, hell, that was the point of trying to get her to like him. He had been keeping his skills hidden in order to better fight potential enemies. He had been taught that the shinobi who was underestimated was usually the one that survived ambushes. Besides, why let the village know what he was truly capable of when they didn't trust or acknowledge his existence? Despite the adversity and the animosity towards him, he loved Konoha, the village his father died to protect, the very same village that his mother had protected with her mere existence. No one in Konoha minus a few select people ever knew that the Red Death of Konoha had also been the vessel to the nine-tailed fox. Turning his attention back to the lecture that Iruka was giving, he sighed and wished that the day would end already. Contrary to popular belief, he never tried to make friends because he never knew if they would still be his friends when they found out about Kyuubi. Plus, he couldn't tell if there was anyone besides Hinata that was trustworthy. Sighing, he couldn't help but think back to the fox that had been his sensei for years. Kyuubi had many names and many forms to choose from. The nine-tailed fox had been known as Kurama years ago at the time of the Rakuto Sennin. However, Kyuubi liked change and had never had the same name twice, nor used the same perceived form twice. Strangely enough, Kyuubi had decided that his newest name would become a contest between the two of them, and whoever came up with a name that he liked would win. Win what had yet to be established. "Boruto Naruto." Iruka finally yelled to try and capture the distracted shinobi hopeful's attention. Jerking his head up to look at his irate teacher, Naruto blushed sheepishly. "Sorry, Iruka-sensei. I wasn't paying attention," Naruto admitted honestly. That had been a first even for him. He could hear the laughter of the class around him, and he paid no mind to it. "I was saying that tomorrow we are going to have a taijutsu test and that you will be required to take it. Call it a warm-up for the final exam in 3 days, Naruto. Try to pay attention, I'm concerned that you won't pass this time." Iruka had a frown on his face, and Naruto felt somewhat bad at making the older nin upset. "Of course, Iruka-sensei. There is no need to worry though, I can totally pass this exam, believe it," he added for emphasis. "I don't believe it, and that is what has me worried. You still have not produced a passable bunshin, and that is a requirement for the exam. You know that. In addition, according to academy rules, if you fail this time then you will not have another chance at becoming a shinobi. You have already failed the exam twice and you only get 3 chances." Iruka lectured. This was the part of the man that he hated. Iruka always forgot not to lecture him about his past failures in class. So naturally, the class would take everything that Iruka would say and use it to taunt him. Naturally, there were a few things that he failed naturally at, but the one thing that he had yet to get down even with Kyuubi's training was his Bunshin jutsu. All of a sudden an idea struck him and he grinned like a lunatic. "Iruka-sensei, I have a question." "Go ahead, Naruto." "Bunshin jutsu is the weakest cloning technique with the lowest chakra requirement, right?" The intelligence behind the question surprised everyone. "That is correct. This is because the Bunshin no jutsu is a Jinjutsu class technique that doesn't make a solid clone of the real thing, like the higher level jutsu." "Why?" Iruka questioned. "Well, we already established that with my chakra reserves, I will never pull off a Jinjutsu, and because of my reserves, it will be near impossible for me to learn any technique that is below C rank without difficulty. So what if the problem isn't that I am not trying or practicing enough to do the jutsu? What if it is because my chakra reserves won't let me do the jutsu?" Everyone in the room was stunned at how Naruto, the class dope, had just described his problem. It actually made a lot of sense to all of them, and that was an accomplishment. Naruto, however, wasn't done. "Also, we had already deduced that I was using a new form of henge, as my henges are real and can be touched. Therefore, wouldn't it make sense to petition the Hokage under Academy guidelines to allow me to learn a more advanced form of Bunshin no Jutsu that takes more chakra and produces a real body?" There he had done it. Naruto had just made everyone including Mizuki look like a fool for not noticing his problem sooner. Iruka's face was a mix of pride, disappointment, and happiness. "I don't believe that I never saw that. Of course, that would be the problem. Why didn't I think of that before?" Iruka suddenly cried out triumphantly. Almost immediately everyone in the class's hand was in the air. Iruka couldn't help but groan at a headache that he knew was coming. "Iruka-sensei, what the hell does the dope mean?" Sasuke demanded. There was no way that someone should have a higher reserve than he did. He trained harder and longer than the whole class, and he was from the Uchiha clan. The strongest clan. Naruto, due to complex circumstances, has a chakra reserve larger than anyone in this building. In fact, I would put his reserves at about Anbu or Kage level. The problem is that a reserve of that level is nearly impossible to control, and learning beginner techniques and Jinjutsu is near impossible. Actually, no one with those kinds of beginning reserves was good at Jinjutsu. Iruka explained, making everyone gape at the grinning blonde. "What kind of complex circumstances?" Sasuke pressed. Iruka frowned, knowing that nothing the boy was told would placate him unless it was the truth. "Circumstances that are both complex and considered an SS rank village secret concerning safety and security. Any further questions would warrant the asker to be arrested, and I will not elaborate on this further. Only the Hokage has the authority to tell, and he will not tell you as the only ones that get to know or Jonin and higher," Iruka said with finality in his voice. Sasuke was hardly appeased with the answer and vowed to find out how the blonde failure had somehow surpassed him and had such a high level of classification when he was nobody of worth. If he had been a clan shinobi, perhaps there would be something to hide, but he wasn't. "Iruka-sensei, if only Jonin and higher get to know, then why do you know?" Sakura innocently asked. Iruka's eye began to twitch. "I was given a special exception when I became Naruto's homeroom teacher. In addition, I was there in the Hokage's office years ago when the law was put into place. Now I want everyone to know this. Even if your parents tell you the reason why, it is still considered high treason and they will be arrested and executed accordingly, as they are also forbidden. If they tell you and you tell someone else, both of you will be executed, no exceptions. Now the rest of the class will be free study until I get back from talking with the Hokage. I expect it to be done silently and in your own seats," Iruka commanded before taking off. Running quickly to the Hokage's tower, he could only hope that he would get permission before something happened in the classroom. "Hey, dope, where did you get your reserves from?" "Special training from the Hokage," Sasuke demanded, hell-bent on finding out. "Nope. As far as I know, I was born with them. Maybe I had some awesome parents that had super cool reserves. I bet that it is my genetics. Or perhaps a new Kekai Genkai." Naruto finished his half-bragging by sticking out his tongue. He knew where he had gotten them. Kyuubi had added a lot to his reserves, and both of his parents had higher than average reserves their whole life. He also knew of the Uzumaki clan and knew of their bloodlines. "Naruto Baka, don't talk to Sasuke-kun like that. Everyone knows that your parents were worthless and that they abandoned you when the Kyuubi attacked." Sakura shrieked in her nails on chalkboard pitch. The other students laughed, cringed at the insult sent to Naruto. Sakura kept going on multiple theories and never noticed Naruto rising from his chair. Clenching his fists in anger, his head dropped so that his hair covered his eyes. "Sakura, take that back." The growl had shut everyone up and had them looking at the young Jinchuriki in shock. That had been the first time that Naruto had not added Chan to the end of Sakura's name 2, retaliated against the teasing and name-calling 3, had growled and finally gave off a killing intent. Let's not forget that the Kai was strong enough to make Mizuki-sensei pay Len back away from the demon host. Staring in shock for a second, Sakura gathered her wits and, seemingly oblivious to the kai coming off of him, stood and looked him right in the face. Or you'll what? Make a half-dead clone and scare me to death with faces? Face it, loser, everyone knows that you are the worst student in this class and that you couldn't hold your own for a minute in a real fight," she said smugly. "Actually, if you bothered to pay attention to the rankings in class, then you would know that technically I am above both Shikamaru and Kiba has the worst scores, thus making him the dope." Naruto seethed. Shikamaru could easily tell that things were getting out of hand. "Hey, could you two keep it down? I can't sleep with this entire racket." Besides, Iruka-sensei said quite steady. He mused out loud. Hear that, Naruto, you are breaking the rules." Sakura looked smugly at him only to gape when Hinata spoke up. "Actually, SSSS Shikamaru-kun was referring to you, Naruto-kun and Sasuke-san, as you were all the ones that started the noise. In reality, it was SSS Sasuke-san that broke the rules first, and out of all three of you, you are being the loudest, Sakura." She managed to get out. Everyone in the class had turned to look at the shy heiress in amazement. Shaking her head, Sakura's sneer returned tenfold, and this time she directed it at the Hyuga heiress. "Why do you stand up for him, Hinata? He is nothing like my Sasuke-kun, and he is worthless just like his parents." She mocked. Actually, I fail to see the greatness of the last Uchiha, as he strikes me as nothing more than a spoiled brat who wants everything but doesn't want to work for it. If one were to think of him as husband material, then I would have to put him at the bottom of the list because of his attitude and overall smugness. I would never want an overconfident, conceited, selfish, spoiled, egocentric lunatic as a husband." Hinata's voice had risen greatly and no one missed that she had lost her stutter. As Sakura went to retort, Hinata cut her off. "On the other hand, almost any other boy in this room would be better husband material. Take Shikamaru-kun. He is intelligent but modest enough not to flaunt it. He is strong but doesn't like to put too much effort into his tests because he doesn't see a need to, and when he puts his mind into something he doesn't stop until he has completed his task. Toji, despite being big-boned, loves food and would ensure that his family is fed before running off for power and is very strong and gentle. Shino is compassionate to all forms of life and has an honest understanding of what being different is like." Hinata took a breath before continuing. "Naruto-kun also knows what being different is like and is strong. He hides all of his talents so that he can try to blend in more easily, and he tries to be nice to everyone he meets. He thinks only the best of other people and tries to see the good in people. He only ever thinks the worst when he is given good reason to by that person, and it takes a lot to convince him. He would rather give his life than see this village or anyone in it get hurt. He would gladly run off to save a complete stranger, disregarding his own safety if he could. When compared to them, Sasuke is more of a controlling, self-centered, power-seeking, egotistical freak who needs to be taken down a peg or two," Hinata said with finality in her voice. Naruto was openly gaping at the young heiress and didn't know what to think. He had no idea that she knew him that well or thought that highly of him. Sasuke, on the other hand, was fuming and couldn't believe what he had just heard. How dare she insult him like that? He knew that she was weird, but to say that the dope was better than him. You. How dare you talk about Sasuke-kun like that? Most of the girls in the room yelled. Hinata didn't back down though. "Ask yourselves this. Why do you like Sasuke besides his name and status? What do you know of his personality? What are his goals? Has he ever displayed any kind of affection towards any of you? Acknowledged your existence? Shown any traits that you would want in the man that you give your life to?" Hinata retorted. She blinked in surprise as she saw many of the girls begin to think about what she had just said. "She's right, forehead, he has never done any of that. I liked him because he was cool and good at everything. But now that I think about it, I would never marry him," she said with no hesitation in her voice. Sakura saw red. She was one of Sasuke's staunchest supporters and she would not allow an insult like this to stand. She lunged at the heiress with every intention of putting her in her place. Jaws widened as a loud crash echoed through the room. Not even Sasuke could make sense of what he had just seen. Naruto, who had been standing on the other side of the room, was now in front of the heiress with a look of murderous rage on his face. His mask was breaking and he didn't care. Even Mizuki was stunned. He didn't think that any genin could move that fast, and yet the Uzumaki had. This only confirmed his belief that Naruto was, in fact, the Kyuubi. Sitting up, Sakura stared at the blonde as the pain began to register. He had never raised a hand to her. He had always followed after her like a lost little puppy, and yet he had just knocked her across the room. The Sasuke, the look on Naruto's face was enough to make Itachi's look like a gentle smile. It made him think back to some of the questions that he had been asked after the massacre. "The last time that you saw Itachi, did he look like he was going to kill your family?" Naturally, his answer had been no. However, now he was looking at someone who did look like they were going to massacre a bunch of people. I don't know what your problem is, Haruno, but attacking Hinata-chan for doing something that most of us have wanted to do for a while is probably the dumbest move that I have ever seen you make. Naruto hissed. He couldn't believe that she would actually go as far as harming the Hyuga heiress, as that alone could cause so many problems, especially between the Hyuga and the civilians. Had Sakura actually hurt Hinata, Hiashi would have been on the warpath. Injuries that occur during a sparring match are one thing, but injuries that occur as a result of a vicious attack are another. Okage-sama, I have come to request permission to teach Naruto either an elemental Bunshin or Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, as his reserves will never allow him to perform the Bunshin no Jutsu, Haruka stated calmly, as soon as the door to the Hokage's office was closed. The Sandaime nearly choked on the smoke from his pipe when he heard what it was that Haruka wanted. Sitting his pipe down, he looked into Haruka's eyes and gave a small nod for Haruka to continue. We were discussing the chances of Naruto passing the next exam, and the subject of Naruto's chakra levels and inability to do Genjutsu came up. It was Naruto who suggested that we attempt a higher level Bunshin, actually. He realized the problem long before I did. Therefore, I wanted to know if I could go ahead and teach him a different Bunshin no Jutsu. He added quickly. Sighing, the old Kage leaned back in his chair and looked out the window. The next exam is in 3 days, Haruka. Do you really think that Naruto can learn a new jutsu and master it in enough time to use it for the exam? Naruto is resilient, so I think that if given a chance he would master the new technique in a few hours, Haruka confirmed. Smiling slightly, the old man turned once again to the teacher. If you think that Naruto will be able to manage, then I will indeed give you permission to teach him a different Bunshin no Jutsu. I will leave it to you though to decide which one though. He added with finality. Haruka nodded and began to contemplate which jutsu it should be. Perhaps, considering the level of his reserves, it should be the shadow clone. He finally said. The Sandaime nodded and quickly wrote the instructions down. Do make sure to stress the importance of using caution with this jutsu. He said, handing them over. He had always seen Naruto as a grandson and he did want the boy to pass as he thought that he could make an excellent shinobi. Haruka smiled and headed back to class. When he got there, the room was quiet and Sasuke and Naruto were glaring at each other. Sakura was sitting under the cracked chalkboard and Mizuki looked like he had seen a ghost. Holding his head, he knew that the rest of the day was going to be very long. DBC, fury and danger. As Haruka released the students from the class for the day, he knew that there were going to be headaches soon. He had left for only a few minutes and yet somehow the kids had gotten into an argument. The fangirls seemed to be re-evaluating their reason for being in the academy in the first place, and Sakura had almost gone through his chalkboard. If what he had been told was true, then Naruto of all people had been the one that had sent her flying. Not to mention that Sasuke looked positively shaken when he had returned. He knew that things were about to be complicated, but hopefully, they would blow over quickly. Sighing, he turned to ask if Mizuki wanted to get something to eat and found that his assistant was nowhere to be found. Shrugging, he headed out to grab something to eat and then start on grading homework. As Naruto headed home, he was quiet thinking of what had happened in the classroom. He had allowed himself to be goaded, he knew that. He was also aware that he had lost his temper and removed more of his mask than he had intended. There were going to be accusations and questions soon enough, and most likely he will be called into the Hokage's office. Most likely they would want to check the seal just in case. He glanced down at the jutsu he was carrying and rolled his eyes. Of course, it would be the shadow clone. Well, at any rate, it would provide me a proper excuse for knowing it if I need to use it, he mused to himself. His parents and the fox had been awfully quiet today, and he didn't know if he should be worried or not. Sensing movement near him, he groaned. Uzumaki, the Hokage has called for you. Was all the Anbu said, and Naruto nodded. How Sakura had gotten home so fast and informed her mother, who then complained to the Sandaime this quickly, would be a mystery to him. When he looked up, however, he noticed that he had been wandering around the village aimlessly for almost an hour now. That explains it, he groaned, cursing himself for losing track of his surroundings and time. As the Anbu shined away holding onto the blonde, Naruto caught a groan just before it could escape. Thank you, boar. The wizened old shinobi said as soon as they appeared in the room. Bowing, the Anbu vanished from sight, but Naruto could sense that he hadn't gone far. That was one thing that had been discovered during his training with his parents. Naruto was a very talented sensor, and his dad had seemed intent on honing it to perfection. He couldn't blame him. Hey Jiji. Naruto chirped at the old man. Naruto, I received a complaint that you had attacked and injured a fellow classmate today. Well, you were supposed to be doing a quiet study. Care to tell me what happened? Well, Sakura shouldn't have been insulting my parents. Plus she attacked Hinata first. I was only protecting her. Naruto protested. He was still angry at the pink-haired banshee. Hiruzen sighed and sat back. Even he knew that the boy was very temperamental when it came to any perceived insult to his parents. He was always asking about them and he really wished he could inform him of them. However, he was worried that it would jeopardize his safety. Be that as it may, starting a confrontation is not the best way to handle such things. While I agree that she should not have attacked Hinata, given the extent of the damage to the classroom, you also retaliated with far too much force. He lectured the petulant blonde. Naruto merely huffed at the old man. I only used the same amount of force required to deal with a beginning level shinobi. It's not my fault that she doesn't train and diets all the time. If she weren't so light then maybe she wouldn't have flown so far. He countered. Hiruzen sighed and rubbed his temples. Another headache he had been enduring lately. Multiple complaints from multiple academy teachers about their female students dieting and not taking their physical training seriously. Shaking his head he stared at the blonde before him, perhaps taking him in for the first time in a long time. He had grown taller and he seemed to fill out more. Perhaps he had learned how to cook and was eating properly. Too much instant ramen was bad for anyone even if they are a Jinchuriki. Naruto, I know that she is highly frustrating, however you mustn't resort to violence every time something becomes frustrating. There were plenty of ways that you could have defused a situation without using violence. He tried to coax the blonde. You are only saying that because you don't want to deal with her mom. If it were anyone else in the class there wouldn't have been any problem with what happened. He yelled angrily. He was tired of the rules always being different for him than they were for everyone else in the village. Yes, sure, he had a massive chakra fox in his stomach, but that didn't mean that they should treat him any differently. Hiruzen groaned. It seemed as if the older Naruto got the more rebellious he became. Though a part of him whispered that the boy was right. If it had been anyone else in the class Akiri wouldn't have reacted the way that she did. All I'm asking is that you try to find more diplomatic means of solving your problems, Naruto. It is something that you have to be able to do if you want to be Hokage. He reasoned using a different approach, hoping that the blonde's aspirations to be Hokage would help to soothe his anger. Yeah, I know that, but if diplomacy worked all the time with people like Sakura, then there wouldn't have been so many wars. He countered again and Hiruzen found himself agreeing with him. The Haruno family was one of the most stubborn families in the village. Many of the Kages and diplomats that he had dealt with over the years had been just as stubborn at times. Did Tobirama sensei ever have this problem or is it just me? He whined internally. Meanwhile, Naruto was having a mental discussion with his dad who had finally spoken up. Naruto just concede the argument for now. He will understand eventually. Unfortunately, he can be just as stubborn as Sakura and her mom. It will sink in when Hiashi catches wind of the incident, he reasoned with his son who whined but agreed to do as he was told. Fine, I'll try. He pouted. Hiruzen smiled and rubbed the boy's head affectionately. He knew that the council would be calling for the seal to be examined soon, and he was tired of reassuring them that the seal was indeed intact and would remain that way so long as there was no undue stress on it. Very well, then you may leave, Naruto, and do be careful with that jutsu, it is a very strong one. Make sure to destroy the instructions when you are done with them. It wouldn't do to have someone get their hands on it that would use it incorrectly. He advised the blonde and Naruto nodded eagerly before bolting from the room. Yeah, I got it. Destroy it as soon as I get home, Naruto snorted mentally, causing his dad to laugh. The knowledge that his parents were with him was very soothing, and as such, he felt content despite the nasty looks he still got from the villagers. He rarely ever felt lonely when looking at other kids with their parents, and if he had to stay that way forever, then so be it. Hey, Naruto, why don't we go work on your shadow clone? There is still a lot of chakra being wasted when you make them, his mom suggested, making him nod enthusiastically. Heading for his favorite training spot, he grinned at the knowledge that he would be training with his parents again. As he reached his favorite training spot, Naruto quickly destroyed the instructions for the shadow clone and quickly set to work on reducing the amount of chakra that was being lost when he cast the jutsu. He, like his mother and father, believed that the smoke that was created was the result of the wasted chakra, so he began to work on cutting down the amount of smoke that was created. He knew that if he could get the shadow clone down to perfection, he would have an easier time with all of his jutsu. The amount of chakra he had was staggering. Well, that was good. In a prolonged battle it came with a heavy price. Little to no chakra control. Furthermore, it would take more work and training than his fellow peers to get the same amount of control that they had. This caused a lot of frustration with Naruto as there were several jutsu that his parents had promised to teach him but refused to do so until he had a certain level of control. He continued to train well into the night and hardly noticed the passage of time. He had just barely managed to cut down on the smoke until there was just a small wispy trail when his sensitive hearing picked up something moving towards him rapidly. Based on the sound that it was making, he deduced that it was a Fuma shuriken and he quickly jumped out of the way of the projectile. Looking around, he spread out his senses looking for the perpetrator. Who's there? Show yourself. He demanded. He again cursed for not paying attention to his surroundings for the second time in one day. Had it not been for the sensitive hearing that he had as a side effect of being a Jinchuriki, he would have missed the shuriken and lost his head. Silence answered him as he forced himself to dodge a volley of kunai and shuriken. He quickly darted behind a tree for cover and started trying to locate his enemy. It didn't take long as the shinobi hadn't even bothered to hide his chakra. "Mizuki-sensei. I know that you are here," he called out. He had never liked the Chunin, and this was only reinforcing his dislike of the man. The Chunin merely laughed and Naruto felt his eye begin to twitch. "Is this how you spend your evenings? Stalking academy students and trying to kill them? Hardly. I have more important things to do. However, exterminating a demon, on the other hand, that is my ideal evening activity." He taunted the blonde. "Demon this, demon that. Do they ever come up with something original to say?" Naruto sighed in exasperation. Locating the Chunin with his senses again, he darted away from his tree silently and made his way around the cocky shinobi. He had no delusions that he could take on Mizuki-sensei in open combat. While he may have the advantage in some areas, Mizuki had the experience advantage. Furthermore, he wouldn't be careless thanks to his earlier display in the classroom. However, his father had once told him that even a civilian could topple a cage if they take them unawares. He hoped to do just that. Darting behind the Chunin's hiding place, he moved to swiftly apply a paralysis seal to the man. He had no intention of harming him if he could help it, but at the same time, he was not about to let the Chunin hurt him either. The seal, however, proved futile as the man exploded into smoke, revealing that the man had used a replacement jutsu. As soon as the log hit the ground, Naruto heard a hissing noise and jumped away to try and avoid the blast. This also proved futile as the tag detonated, but the expected explosion never came. Instead, a blinding flash of light filled the clearing, and Naruto had to retract his senses to avoid the onslaught of chakra that had been released. It had been a chakra flash. A relatively new type of flash bomb designed to be used against sensor-type ninjas. The first stage was to take out their eyesight so that they couldn't see, and then a wave of chakra was released rapidly that overloaded a sensor-type's ability temporarily. He should have known it was a trap. Of course, the Chunin wouldn't risk being caught off guard. He was taking every precaution so that Naruto couldn't find him. He landed on the ground and quickly strained his ears listening for any movement. A sound similar to kunai sailing through the air sounded from his left and he quickly jumped to avoid those only to feel a sharp pain in his abdomen. Something had struck him, what he didn't know, but it had buried itself very deep. The pain took him by surprise, and the darkness that he saw as a result of the flash bomb seemed to overtake his mind as he lost consciousness. He was in pain, that much he knew. Opening his eyes, he noticed that he was surrounded by the familiar walls of the sewer that was his mind. He could have sworn that he changed this place into a forest for Kyuubi. Heading towards Kyuubi's cage, he noted the difficulty he was having in walking. Forcing himself to continue, he managed to half stumble to the wise demon's cell and look around. "Ayu?" he called out softly. There was no reply. He felt himself beginning to panic and the beginnings of fear rising in his chest. He called out once more before heading into the cage. Looking around, he found it was bare as if it had never housed the ancient and powerful demon. "Kyuubi?" he called in a panic. Kyuubi had never failed to respond to him, and it was this fact alone that had him scared. Hearing a noise behind him, he spun and smiled in relief when he saw his parents behind him. "Tusan, Kasan, where is Kyu?" Kyuubi was released into the outside world. "The seal is crumbling and it can no longer contain her. Not only did you come to close to death, the injury that you sustained in your abdomen tore through the seal. Normally that wouldn't be that much of a problem, however, the attack was laced with chakra, so it did cause extensive damage," Minato explained. Naruto felt tears welling up in his eyes. Kyuubi was gone because he had let his guard down. "Will Kyuubi stay with me?" he asked in a small voice. Kushina gave a soft smile and wrapped her arms around the boy. "Ayu said that she was going to stay with you and that she would bind herself to you in one way or another. Even if it means crafting a seal to ensure that you live. She seems to have grown attached to you. You can change your mind back as well. When you awake and bind yourself with Kyuubi, she should be able to return to your mind. Unless, of course, she has another form of binding in which she does not need you to be awake. For the time being though, we have a lot to cover and you will be asleep for some time." It seems that the Shiki Fuin seal combined with the 8 tetragram seal accidentally sealed away from your bloodlines, and when Kyuubi was released they were as well. So we have decided that we would assist you with them. There is only one problem though. "What problem?" Naruto questioned, turning his mind back into a forest clearing. Currently, they were sitting by the waterfall he had added as a new addition. It seems that having a child that becomes the Kyuubi's vessel when the mother already was the Kyuubi's vessel gave birth to a new Dojutsu. We know nothing about it and I think that only Kyuubi could help you with it as all of the world's Dojutsu and bloodlines came from demons. So when you get to talk to Kyuubi again, ask her to train you with them, okay? "Okay." Naruto agreed. He was ecstatic. He had a bloodline that no one else had. Nodding enthusiastically, he set to work with his parents, knowing that the coming days would be difficult. TBC, new concerns. The hospital was alive with activity as the staff struggled to save the life of two patients that had wound up in the emergency room several minutes earlier. The circumstances of their injuries made no sense, however. At the moment their job was to save the life of the two. Questions could be asked later. Outside of the emergency room, the sensei paced relentlessly. He had been made aware of the events surrounding the chaotic movements of the hospital staff by a massive wave of chakra that had swept through the village. By the time that he had arrived at the scene, Naruto was unconscious with a Fuma shuriken nearly cutting him in half, and nearby Mizuki Taoji was lying in a pool of his own blood. The man was missing several of his limbs and appeared to have struck his head on a now toppled tree. He had ordered the Anbu to bring the Chunin to the hospital and had carefully brought the blonde himself. Now as he waited for news, he found himself growing agitated. Nearby, Haruka was in a similar state. He too had felt the chakra and immediately identified it as Naruto's. He had not gotten off on the right foot with Naruto in the beginning, but he liked to see the boy as a little brother now. He had no idea what Mizuki had been thinking, as he had clearly recognized the shuriken embedded inside of the boy. He was furious at his childhood friend for daring to hurt his Odo, but at the same time, he was confused as to why Mizuki wanted to hurt him. Naruto had never done anything wrong, and the fact that someone was willing to try and end his life for no reason was foreign to him. As a shinobi, he knew that people died frequently, however, there was usually a reason. A mission that happened to pit two countries against each other, war, assignation jobs, etc. He just hoped that the energetic blonde would be okay. As the doors swung open, they noticed the doctor in charge of the surgery to try and repair the damage done to Naruto's internal organs, looking quite panicked. Sandaime-sama, the seal, he managed to breathe out quietly so that no one nearby could hear him. The color drained from the faces of both shinobi as Hiruzen ran through the doors. As the only person in Konoha with a few ninjutsu knowledge, he had to try and do everything he could to stop the seal from breaking. However, the sight that greeted him as he entered the room only made his stomach drop. Naruto's body was quickly being covered in Kyuubi's cloak whilst the medic nins were attempting to heal him. As the cloak began to thicken and then stray from his body, taking a solidified form, Hiruzen's eyes darted back to the seal on Naruto's stomach and blanched to find that it was cracking quickly. Too quickly to fix. Once the form took shape, everyone in the room felt their blood run cold to see Kyuubi in all of its foxy glory, swinging its 9 tails staring at her previous host. Albeit the fox was smaller than everyone remembered, but there was no mistaking it. Everyone move away from him. I will heal him, and now that I am in this form it should be easier. I will not trust your kind with my vessel. I do not see what it is about this village that Naruto wants to protect, but it is his wish that I do not harm it should I ever gain independence. I will allow you to move him to an actual room, as I have no intention of allowing him to sleep on the floor. Kyuubi all but ordered. Nodding numbly, one of the medic nin jumped up and swiftly but carefully moved Naruto to an isolated room in the northern corridor. Curling around the bed, Kyuubi placed a tail over Naruto's still form and began to pulse with a brilliant red light. Tempting fate, Hiruzen stepped into the room and managed to find his voice. How is it that you can heal him more easily than before like this, and how did you get free? I can heal him more easily as my chakra is not being detained and held back. Besides, we still have a small link. One of my tail's powers is healing, which I can choose to use by my own will. Looking up at the old Hokage, Kyuubi felt a tinge of remorse as she recognized him as the mate to the woman that had been killed the night of Naruto's birth. I apologize for the death of your mate, but I can assure you that I was not the one that took her life. At the time that she died, I was still sealed inside of my previous vessel. Kyuubi spoke honestly, startling the Anbu and the Hokage. What do you mean that you were not the one that killed Bawako? Hiruzen felt his heart flip-flop. Did this mean what he thought that it meant? Had someone learned of Naruto's birth and purposely set the Kyuubi free? Not now, I need to concentrate and focus on the kid. When I am done I will inform you and the Shinobi Council of what I know. I warn you though, I will not hesitate to attack the civilian council or those so-called elders. I do not trust them as far as I can throw them. That told Hiruzen a lot, seeing as Kyuubi could throw quite a distance. I understand. Although I will need assurance that you will not attack the village. Unlike you humans, Kyuubi spat the word distastefully, we demons keep to our words. I promised him that I would not attack Konoha, and I intend to keep my promise. I will not leave him unattended. Should I or he be attacked, I will strike back with lethal force. Do you understand? Very well. Hiruzen turned, ordered everyone from the room, and then looked at some of the Anbu. No one goes in that room, and no one learns of what has transpired outside of who I decide to tell. Is that understood? They all nodded in affirmation, and Hiruzen left to inform the council of what has transpired. He knew that he was going to have a headache before the day was over. At the council meeting, I have just returned from the hospital and have both good and bad news, Hiruzen said, gaining the rapt attention of the people in front of him. What do you mean? Hiashi was already in a bad mood. He had just been informed of the Haruno spawn's attack on his daughter, and he was on the verge of screaming in frustrations, having been in another meeting with the clan elders, demanding that Hinata or Hanabi be branded. Naruto is in critical but stable condition, he reported. The shinobi nodded, knowing that was to be expected with the Kyuubi. The civilians, however, were not as happy. So what's the good news? Sakiri Haruno asked. The fact that he will live is the good news. That didn't bode well with the clan heads. Then what is the bad news? Hiruzen never got a chance to answer as the door flew open and Jiraiya stormed in. What the fuck happened to Naruto? Everyone froze, wondering how he had found out. What makes you think that something happened to Naruto? Homura answered, hoping to calm the irate Sannin. Jiraiya spun and a frog that looked as if it was sitting on a scroll came out of hiding. This is the key to the Kyuubi seal. It is used to tighten and loosen the seal as necessary for Naruto to gain the Kyuubi's power. The scroll should be filled with the sealing formula. As the scroll opened, the room paled and gasped could be heard as they noticed it was blank. This means that the seal has been damaged beyond repair and that the Kyuubi is free. The annoyed summons answered. What do we do? This is a catastrophe. Silence. Hiruzen roared. This made everyone return to their seats and Jiraiya took his seat as well. As I was saying, because Naruto came extremely close to death due to an unprovoked attack by one of our shinobi, Hiruzen growled. What will we do, Hokage-sama? Any minute now the Kyuubi is sure to finish what it started 12 years ago. Inoichi mused. That will not happen. This got everyone's attention. The Kyuubi has made a vow with Naruto that it will not attack Konoha. However, the deal did allow for lethal force should the Kyuubi or Naruto be attacked. As of right now, the Kyuubi is at the hospital giving Naruto much needed medical attention. Hiruzen actually liked the shocked expression that they gave. You mean that the Kyuubi is obediently sitting at the hospital healing a human and abiding by an oath that it was forced to take by its vessel? Chaoza said incuriously. Hiruzen nodded. How can we believe that the demon will keep its word? Koharu demanded. For one, it appears that the Kyuubi has taken a liking to Naruto. A feat that some might call a miracle. The bond must have been formed over many years and I doubt that it was easy. Secondly, I feel that there is something that the Kyuubi wants from Konoha and it has offered to give us every detail of the night that it attacked, which may explain the cut on Minato's leg and the fact that the Anbu guarding Kushina and Bawako were not killed by the Kyuubi, but rather a kunai. It could be attacking right now, but it is not. Is that not proof enough of its promise? It could be leading us to a false sense of security. Danzo argued. As much as he hated to admit it, there was no one in Konoha that could stop the Kyuubi should it decide to attack. Therefore they needed to find a way to destroy it. It took everything that Minato had just to seal Kyuubi. It took every ounce of his strength to do so. Kyuubi has vowed not to attack providing that we leave it and Naruto alone for the time being. Do you really want to give it a reason to attack? Everyone shook their heads. They had lost too many the last time. Everything that we have discussed here is a triple S rank secret. I expect it to remain a secret as we do not need a mass lynching. In the meantime, Jiraiya and I will look for ways to ensure that the boy remains in control of the Kyuubi and that the Kyuubi can cause no harm. Everyone nodded. Danzo was wondering how he could get his hands on the demon boy to ensure that the Kyuubi would obey him. If he controlled the boy and the boy controlled Kyuubi, it would be just perfect. DBC, attempting peace. Ugh, me head hurts. Naruto whimpered out loud, scaring the sleeping fox. Kyuubi had used what little power she had taken with her when she left Naruto's body healing him, so she had been exhausted. She had to admit though that the healing abilities of the ninjas had been quite decent, even by her standards. You're awake. How are you? I'm okay. Well, as good as I am going to get with exploding tags going off in my head. How long have I been asleep? 2 days. I am even amazed that you are awake. I thought that it would take you longer. Oh, the wonders of the Uzumaki blood in you. Your mother even survived my removal from her seal. It was quite astonishing. Thanks for the encouragement. I guess that I lived because I had already absorbed most of your chakra. Mostly. I think that you would have survived without it. The Kyuubi was staring at Naruto intently when Hiruzen opened the door and looked in. Spying on me with your crystal ball again, old man? Naruto taunted. Hiruzen nodded with a slight smile and led just the clan heads into the room. Am I in trouble or something? Naruto whined. No. Kyuubi promised us something when it came out and since you are awake we thought that we would come and collect, Hiashi informed the boy. Naruto lifted his eyebrow. He was no fool. He knew that this man was mostly responsible for Hinata's shyness and lack of confidence. However, at the moment he looked old and exhausted. He wasn't sure what to think of the Hyuga clan head. What did you promise them, Kyuubi, and what gender do you feel like being today? Naruto asked with a small smile. This confused the shinobi as Kyuubi stood to yawn and then began to shrink somewhat in shimmer. When the light was gone, every male in the room, all of them, blushed and had to stop their nosebleeds. Before them was a tall woman around 5'11", with floor-length long red hair parted into 9 braids. She had crimson eyes that had slit her eyes. The thing was she was completely naked. For Inari's sake, put some clothes on Kyuubi. Naruto yelled, burying his head, muttering out apologies to the men before them. Giggling, Kyuubi held out her hand and a crimson-red kimono with a fox on it draped itself around her. You would think that none of you had seen a naked female before. Kyuubi teased. The 9-tailed is a girl. Chaozu sputtered. Vixen is the correct term, and no. I can be whatever I want to be. Changing our forms and genders are one of the few more enjoyable abilities given to us by the Rakuto Sennin. Kyuubi responded, sitting on Naruto's bed and pulling him back into a laying position with his head on her lap. You shouldn't be sitting up yet, young man. She chastised. I will change my form as I see fit. This is just the temporary form that I have taken in order to speak to you without everyone staring at my canines. I see. You offered to inform us of exactly what happened the night that you attacked. Hiruzen said. I did. However, I will not say a word until the perverted Sannin comes in the room. I do not like being spied on. Kyuubi said loudly as Jiraiya came in, blushing. She then removed one of Naruto's kunai and threw it into the head of an Anbu root member. Everyone couldn't help but pale as the kunai had gone through the root's mask, head and halfway into the wall. Now that we are alone and Jiraiya has placed the appropriate seals in the room, I will tell you what I know. First, however, I think that you need a history lesson. Over 1,000 years ago, the Rakuto Sennin battled the Jubi. The 10-tailed. Its species is unknown even to us Bijuu, but we do know that the Jubi's body was sealed away and later became the moon. The Jubi itself was sealed into the Rakuto Sennin. The Rakuto Sennin had 3 children, one of which was never known to the world as his. The eldest son inherited the eyes of the Rakuto. However, the eyes that were inherited were not the Rinnegan. It was the Sharingan. This child went on to be the ancestor of the Uchiha line. The middle child and youngest son inherited the chakra of the Rakuto. This child became the ancestor of the Senju line. The third child was hidden from all. For this child had inherited the actual eyes, the Rinnegan, of the Rakuto and the longevity, the body, of the Sennin. She would become the ancestor of the Uzumaki line. She was hidden out of fear of those that would covet her power. He created the 9 of us Bijuu from the Jubi's powers and gave us names and life. He taught us many things and was like a father to us. He did this to prevent the Jubi from returning. He knew that should the Jubi return that the world would end. At first, his sons were close, always in the other's company. However, after the eldest awoke his Sharingan, he began to slowly change. He became more aggressive and drifted away from his brother. Eventually, the rift between them was too great, and upon hearing that the younger was to be the heir of the Rakuto, the eldest became angry at being denied his birthright. The two began to fight and eventually, they killed each other. This was the start of the Uchiha Senju feud. The Rakuto took his daughter's existence with him to the grave, and his sons never knew of their sister. They, the Uzumaki, lived a long, prosperous and isolated life on the island that became Yuzushiogakure. However, the Uchiha and the Senju clans continued their fight for supremacy. They quickly forgot what they were fighting for and, eventually, the path desired by their ancestor. We Bijuu led peaceful lives, traveling and looking for a place that we could call home. Only showing our true forms when a place became corrupted and tarnished with hatred and evil. Our existence as such was that of balance. We eliminated sources of evil that would tip the fragile balance that our father struggled to achieve. Finally, we settled. It was around this time that the Senju and the Uchiha finally came to a compromise. The Bijuu had been dormant and had not destroyed anything in over 200 years. That was a record for us. However, peace was not soon to last. They began bickering over how the village should be formed, governed, inhabited, as well as many other political problems. So the Senju called on their cousin clan, the Uzumaki, who had made a name for themselves using the art of Fuinjutsu, and asked for them to be a mediator in the conflict. The Uzumaki agreed and thus Konoha was formed. However, not long after many of the Uzumaki left, the tension returned. Many of the people thought that Hashirama Senju should be the Shodaime Hokage, while Madara Uchiha insisted that he should be the Shodaime. They fought and Senju won yet again. This victory left Madara bitter. He felt that the Senju clan had stripped the Uchiha of its glory and strength and was seeking to destroy the clan. He tried many times to get the clan to help him with an uprising, but it was in vain. The clan trusted the Shodaime and thought that Madara was just stirring the flames of war once again. Tobirama, however, did not trust Madara and decided that as a show of trust to the rest of the clan, he would allow them the task of policing the village. He entrusted them with the safety of the village, and that was enough for the clan. Madara was finally ousted from the clan, and he swore revenge on the Shodaime for what he saw was the theft of the power the once noble Uchiha had. He began to seek me out, hearing tales of how I was the strongest of the 9. Kyuubi paused to take a drink from the water on Naruto's bedside table. It was on a mountain that I called home that Madara found me. I was calm and had no inclination to get involved in the petty squabbles of an unbalanced individual. However, Madara insisted, and when I threatened to kill him if he did not leave, he turned his Sharingan on me. The next I remember, I was sealed inside of Mito and had been for several years. She informed me that Madara had used me to attack Hashirama, and I had been sealed in order to protect both me and the village from those that would use me. She said that Madara had been killed in the fight and that I need not fear being controlled again. However, as I told her, that was impossible. For Madara was still alive. Only a Mangekyou user can kill a Mangekyou user. The techniques that stage of the Sharingan grants to those that have it must be countered by those that also have them. We agreed that it would be best if I remained sealed just in case for a little while longer. Not much later it was discovered that Madara's body was not in his grave. My words had been true, and again I watched as the tension between Senju and Uchiha began to grow once more. Over the years I noticed changes in Mito's body, however, not being mortal, I was unaware of what those changes meant. I was only made aware that the woman was dying when she informed me that I was to be transferred to another vessel. This vessel's mind was even warmer than Mito's ever was. Everything progressed smoothly with barely any cause for concern until Kushina went into labor. The Namikaze boy was supposed to be stabilizing my seal, however, he kept getting distracted. Surprisingly, he was able to keep it intact until the child was born. Kyuubi chuckled a little to herself at the memory of Minato's inability to focus. It was after the cord was cut that everything went south. A man that had learned of the location of the birth broke in and killed the attending midwives, as well as the Anbu guards. Taking Naruto hostage, he demanded that Kushina is turned over to him. Minato wasn't about to abandon his wife until he was forced to choose between her and Naruto. Saving Naruto's life, he was forced to teleport away to protect everyone from exploding tags that had been placed on Naruto's blanket. That was when Kushina was taken and the seal broken. I don't remember much except for seeing Sharingan. The only set that I knew that could control me was Madara's eyes. The next thing I remember is being in the village and being attacked by shinobi. Confused as to my whereabouts, I defended myself. Then the blasted toad landed on my back and I was to be sealed once more. However, I had no desire to be sealed in anyone other than Kushina, as we had a passable relationship. I most definitely didn't want to be sealed in a defenseless baby, so I tried to remedy the situation. Unfortunately, they decided that they were human shields and protected Naruto. Not that I mind now, but I did back then. Since then I have been sealed inside of Naruto, attempting to deal with the fact that I had killed one of the few that did not consider me a weapon. Naruto was not aware that I was sealed inside of him until he fell and cracked his head open a few years back. Not long after, he made a deal with the death god to restore Minato and Kushina to life in exchange for the souls of the 4 people who have escaped death. Haiden the Jashin worshipper, Kakazu of the 5 hearts, Orochimaru of the Sannin, and Madara Uchiha. Kyuubi continued taking some sadistic pleasure in the expressions that she was getting from the shinobi in front of her. In accordance with the deal, Minato and Kushina will be revived upon the death of the first of 4 and permanently returned when all 4 have been received. If, however, Naruto fails to retrieve all of them, Kushina, Minato and Naruto forfeit their souls to the death god in exchange. Yes, they are in Naruto's head, and yes, they are aware of everything that has happened since their deaths. No, they are not happy and they really want to have a word with you, Hiruzen. Kyuubi finished. The Sandaime had been forced to make difficult decisions many times before, but in all honesty, this was the hardest decision that he would ever have to make. He had no doubt that any attempt on Naruto's life may result in a pile of bodies. In addition, he was aware that many would try and kill the demon when they found out she was free. However, he knew that there was no way that the demon would be leaving Naruto's side for any reason. She seemed to generally care for the boy in what way he did not know. He also felt that there was something more than the fox wanted but hadn't said yet. Tell me, Kyuubi, how can we trust that you will only attack in defense of yourself and Naruto? Well, you may see something as an attack, the rest of the village, ourselves included, may not see that way. What is preventing you from claiming an attack? Hiashi asked evenly. Kyuubi raised an eye and smiled serenely. Technically you can't. You see, you humans have a bad habit of ignoring certain things as an attack. You brush it off as normal childish behavior, boys being boys, or even an accident. We demons see things differently. Normal childish behavior does not result in broken bones or bruises. It is not just boys being boys when insults are thrown just to destroy another's confidence. Or striking out and hitting people with sticks. Stealing personal effects of others and destroying them. Accidents also do not happen repeatedly. I understand that Naruto is aiming to be a shinobi, and I understand that there is no real safe way to spar. However, what some of his classmates do in the spars against him are overboard. There should be no need for a full-powered attack during a friendly spar. Those are not normal mannerisms in children. That is called being a bully. Bullying is something we demons do not tolerate. Humans have a bad habit of ignoring it. So you do not know if I will act on a perceived attack that you do not recognize as one. I have been in the human world for many centuries and I know acceptable human behavior. I will lash out at any unacceptable behavior. I will keep the force equivalent to the crime, however. If for any reason though I am placed anywhere near the Uchiha boy, however, all bets are off. I will finish the job that Itachi set out to do on in order to protect that snobbish brat. Even if he had orders to do so. Have I made myself clear? What do you mean that Itachi was acting on orders? Hiashi hissed out. Oh please. Do you really think that someone who abhorred violence would actually willingly slaughter his whole clan? Kyuubi retorted. Hiashi's eyes widened. He would if it meant that his beloved little brother was safe. Or if it would stop more people from dying. The Uchiha clan was plotting a coup. Hiruzen sighed. Somehow he had been afraid of this. Yes, they were. I was still in discussions with them over the issue when Itachi slaughtered them. I had hoped to only go that way as a last resort. However, Itachi moved on his own. He was the one that brought the coup to my attention in the first place. I had asked him to spy on the clan after that so that we would be forewarned if they were going to attack. In exchange for keeping Sasuke safe and keeping the coup a secret from the village, Itachi agreed to be a spy for Konoha, infiltrating organizations that would be impossible for any shinobi in good standing. Hiruzen explained. The clan heads were visibly shaken. One of the strongest clans in the village had been plotting to betray them, and on top of that, it had been a founding clan. Furthermore, one of Konoha's strongest Nukenin was actually Konoha's most loyal shinobi. I see. How were you aware of this, Kyuubi? Do you really think that I wouldn't notice behavior similar to Madara's in an entire clan? However, I do think that there was something more behind their coup. Something that Itachi had not discovered when he killed them. The timing seemed off. I am also certain that had Mikoto and Fugaku fought back, Itachi would not have succeeded in getting out of the village. For some reason they let themselves be killed. Kyuubi said, looking out the window. No one said anything for several moments. What is it that you truly want? Hiruzen finally questioned the fox. Just as I said. Though picking the Kit's team and Jonin would be a bonus. Heaven forbids anyone in the village is unbiased. Especially since I already know exactly how the teams are going to be arranged. That is assuming that the elders haven't already decided that the Uchiha should have his headband before the test. Don't make that face. They have gone behind your back and made every law, every rule, and every arrest useless since you returned to be Hokage, and you have done nothing about it. You are nothing more than a figurehead in a village you have no control over. As Hokage, you have all the power yet you never use it. Instead, you let people who have no say in certain matters have a say and act as if this is a democracy when in reality it is a form of dictatorship. The vixen lectured. No one had ever had the gall to talk to him like that, and to be honest, Hiruzen felt like he was 5 again, being chastised for doing something wrong. Since you seem to know the team formation so well, why don't you enlighten the rest of us? Shikaku stated. Teams 1 through 6 will be made with no structure or purpose behind them, and as a result, none of them will make it past the secondary exam. Team 7 will undoubtedly wind up as the classic rookie of the year, highest scoring Kunoichi academically speaking, and the lowest scoring student, who through tampering, will undoubtedly wind up as Naruto. Which means that it would be Sakura, Sasuke, and Naruto under the last surviving member of the former Team 7, Hada Kakashi. Furthermore, Kakashi will be given orders by the elders not to train Naruto in anything, and instead focus all of his attention on the Uchiha and to teach him everything that he knows. Which in order to remind you would include the Rikiri and the Rasengan. Teammate would be Shino, Hinata, and Kiba. This team, while it would become functional due to Shino's drive and Hinata's cooperation, would only be just that. Shino and Hinata can't stand Kiba, and to be quite honest, Kiba is a shameless pervert who makes Jiraiya look like a saint. They would be placed under Yuuhi Kurenai because she has had prior interaction with Hinata. However, she is the least qualified to lead any team, let alone a tracking team. Team 10 would be the classic Ino Shikacho formation that has been used so many times it is predictable. That team would operate under Sarutobi Asuma. Not a bad Jonin, but too lazy and too reliant on past success. Kyuubi finished. The way that the vixen broke down the team placements actually startled the veteran shinobi. She had also analyzed the Jonin as well. I see, then how would you do it? Hiruzen queried, generally curious. Not telling until the exam is over. Besides, it wouldn't be fair for Naruto to have the inside scoop on team formations. Saying the way that it would naturally play out is no issue because I can guarantee that Sakura was told by her mother how she needed to score in the academy to make it on Sasuke's team, and Shikamaru and Shino already have a good idea. I see. I have no issue placing Naruto in your care so long as we still have a functioning population at the end of the week. Furthermore, I ask that you at least give the kids a chance to change. Many of them are merely following in their parents' example, and many are doing only as they are told. Hiruzen relented. Nodding, the Kyuubi accepted the terms. You claim that Naruto needs to kill Haiden, Kakuzu, Madara, and Orochimaru, but how is he supposed to do something that no one has been able to accomplish, and not even the Shaddai was able? Chaoza asked. For the most part, Naruto only need be nearby when they die. However, as part of the agreement I made with him, he does indeed need to kill Madara. As for killing him, there are ways to do so. Minato, Kushina and I have been training him with that goal in mind. I have no doubt that the death god may have something else in mind if it appears that merely being nearby won't be possible. Although that would require that Naruto actively hunt them down. Kyuubi mused. Now as it is obvious that I can't immediately become a Jonin and take Naruto's training into my hands, I warn you now that I will be taking the exam as well. I don't care what excuse you make, but I will be receiving a team with Naruto. It would be easier anyway than me merely following him from the village. Kyuubi declared. Hiruzen groaned. The paperwork and headaches that the council would give him were going to be astronomical. Though in a way that would be the best bet in the long run. Furthermore either me, Naruto or a clone of one us will be sitting in on the council from now on to represent the Namikaze and Uzumaki clans. I will not have the civilians running Konoha anymore and doing Inari knows what with those votes. I can guarantee you that every absentee vote has been misused by the council and I intend to put a stop to it. Kyuubi growled. Academy students and Genin can't Hiruzen was cut off. Actually Kushina was given her council seat as soon as she arrived in the village and was allowed to sit in immediately as a civilian, so the rules should be no different for Naruto. Kyuubi barked. Nodding in agreement Hiruzen knew that he would be needing an aspirin. Final matter of business. My name. Unless you want to call me Kyuubi on all of my paperwork can literally tell all of the elemental nations that I am walking free, we will need a new one for me. That is Naruto's honor though. Whatever he chooses will be my name and gender from now on. Well, how about Kamiko? Naruto whispered. I like. Noble child huh? Kyuubi grinned. It seemed as if everything had been decided and as such the barriers were taken down. As Hiruzen opened the door, a group of nosy civilians and elders spilled into the room in an obvious attempt at eavesdropping. Now what do we have here? Kamiko sneered. The elders looked up and attempted to save face however it was harder done than said. Especially with the sharp vixen in the room. DBC, meeting the shrews and the exam, final matter of business. My name. Unless you want to call me Kyuubi on all of my paperwork can literally tell all of the elemental nations that I am walking free, we will need a new one for me. That is Naruto's honor though. Whatever he chooses will be my name and gender from now on. Well, how about Kamiko? Naruto whispered. I like. Noble child huh? Kyuubi grinned. It seemed as if everything had been decided and as such the barriers were taken down. As Hiruzen opened the door, a group of nosy civilians and elders spilled into the room in an obvious attempt at eavesdropping. Now what do we have here? Kamiko sneered. The elders looked up and attempted to save face however it was harder done than said. Especially with the sharp vixen in the room. What are you doing? He demanded. Everyone who had landed unceremoniously on the floor suddenly shot to their feet and at least had the decency to look embarrassed. We heard that you were going to have a meeting with the fox and we were going to join you seeing as it seemed that the memo got lost on its way to us. However, we found that we could not enter the room and were attempting to see if you had already started by trying to hear your voice in order to let you know that we were here. When you didn't answer the door we became worried and tried to hear what was going on, but we couldn't hear anything. Then you opened the door. Koharu explained. Hiruzen raised an eyebrow. Did it never occur to you that perhaps I left you out on purpose? Perhaps because you had no business at the meeting to begin with? He queried. The Shinobi Council watched in amusement as the group before they went scarlet at the insinuation that they had been excluded on purpose and that they were unwanted at the meeting. Of course we had every reason to be here. If it concerns the safety of the village Koharu started to rant. Then you have nothing to do with it. Only the Hokage and clan heads have any business discussing the safety of the village. You are merely there to advise him on daily things and report to the Hokage on the state of civilian matters. Kamiko snapped. Everyone's heads turned as she and Naruto stepped into sight. Naruto was wearing some new clothes and looked ready to leave. Who do you think you are to tell us what is and is not our business? Sakura shrieked in rage. I am the very thing that you fear. The Kyuubi no Kitsune. You would do well to mind your tongue in my presence and your volume. She snapped releasing killing intent on the group. Every single one of them stepped back in fear and gulped nervously. Before them was the very reason that they had all lost someone important almost 12 years ago. Next to the demon was the vessel looking somewhat smug. You really shouldn't make Kamiko mad. She already doesn't like any of you. Besides dad isn't very happy either. He informed them. Looking up at the sandame he tilted his head in curiosity. When is the next meeting so that someone is there? Knowing the civilians right now. He sighed. Kamiko smirked and created a clone from her demonic energy and then headed into the hallway. My clone will accompany you then. Naruto has much training to do before the exam tomorrow. She said as they disappeared around the corner. Shaking his head he looked at the group before him. Shall we take this to the council room? As the demonic clone made its way down the hall towards the meeting room, it could feel all of the tension around it. Similar to the shadow clone, the demonic clone transferred the memories back to the host but also took on a personality that was somewhat unique. Unfortunately for the Konoha Council and elders, that meant that it wasn't as reserved as the real Fox would have been. The meeting room door opened and everyone filed in silently. The clan heads knew that the civilians were going to make a big fuss out of everything. However, they were looking forward to when they said the wrong thing and Kamiko's clone went off on them. Once everyone had taken their seats, Hiruzen cleared his throat. "We will keep this meeting organized and civil. We are grown adults and I expect everyone to act like it. The first thing we need to discuss is the fact that Naruto is indeed awake and will be ready to take the exam tomorrow. Second, the Nine Tails, Kamiko, will be joining the class for the exam. No, this is not negotiable. Despite the fox being on the outside of the seal, she is still limited in how far she can go from Naruto and as such will be placed on whatever team Uzumaki is placed on. It seems that Kamiko was able to craft a new supplementary seal in the process of leaving and healing Naruto. Now, were there any questions or concern that need to be addressed? One at a time, as I am unable to answer 5 questions that have been blended into one." He queried, opening the floor for the spies to speak. "Why weren't we invited? Surely Hiruzen, you don't intend to keep the civilians ignorant of something that obviously affects them just as it affects the shinobi?" Kaharu asked in slightly raised tone. "Kaharu, allowing the civilian council to be formed during my first reign to try and allow the civilians to be more aware of events that may indeed affect them as they live here seems to have been a mistake. All that has occurred since its formation is a group of civilians trying to overthrow the Hokage's power and take control of a village that they don't have the first clue of running. They are blissfully unaware of just how much work goes into the maintenance and stability of Konoha, and yet they seem to think that they can run the village far better than any shinobi can. Furthermore, so long as the civilians do not attack Uzumaki, there is no reason to think that the current situation should affect them at all. The same goes for the shinobi. So long as there is no threat posed to Naruto, then there is no threat to them. As things stand now, the Kyuubi has become a valuable ally, and that is something that has not happened since the first Jinchuriki was created." Hiruzen encountered Kaharu, Himura and he had been on the same team as a genin, and while they had grown older and learned more and more about how the world worked, he couldn't help but wonder just how much the three of them had changed. "So you are saying that the village will not be informed that the Kyuubi is once again walking around the village and may lash out at any time?" Sakiri screeched. "That is exactly what I am saying. The less the village knows, the better in this case. Unless that is, you have forgotten about the riots that occurred when the village was notified of Naruto's existence." Hiruzen countered, shutting the Banshee up temporarily. "The Kyuubi will be taking the exam tomorrow. Does that mean that the fox will be under Konoha's direct control like any other shinobi in good standing wearing the village headband?" Danzo quipped, startling everyone in the room. Many had not even seen him enter. "No. The headband is only to make Kamiko's departure from the village less suspicious. Since she is tethered to Naruto still, she will be following him on all of his missions, and this just makes the process easier." Hiruzen explained. "Is there any reason that we are referring to the demon by a human name?" he queried. "Do you wish to call her Kyuubi and inform all of the shinobi nations that the Nine-Tailed is walking independently from its Jinchuriki?" Hiruzen smirked at the old warhawk how quickly backed down. Danzo had to agree that Hiruzen had won that round with pure logic, using his own strategies against him. Now then, a part of the deal that was struck with Kamiko and Naruto was that Kamiko got to choose Naruto's team and Jonin to ensure that there was no unfairness in the decision. "I expect you to respect the decision." The room was silent, and in all honesty, the Sandaime and shinobi were enjoying the silence. The next morning, the genin hopefuls gathered at the academy, anxious about their final exams. They had heard the rumors that Mizuki had been killed in an attempt to betray the village and had no idea what to expect without their assistant present. They knew that Iruka and Mizuki had been friends and were unsure if they should offer condolences or just leave it be. When they entered the room, they saw Naruto sitting at one of the tables next to a female that they had never seen before, who was wearing the strangest outfit for a shinobi. It looked as if she were ready to go to a gathering in a kimono as opposed to the academy exams. Maybe she is only keeping Naruto company until the exams begin, they thought. As everyone took their seat, the door opened and Iruka walked into the room just as quiet. He had been told that there would be a new student in the class for the exam, but no other explanation had been given. "Alright everyone, we will get started on the exam. There are several different parts to the exam, and each part can and will affect your overall standing. As a result of T&I investigation into Taji Mizuki's attempt at betraying the village, academic sabotage was found present in the class. As a result, everyone is currently starting at the beginning of the year, with no prior marks. This means that the Rookie and Kenwaichi of the Year title will go to those with the highest exam scores. First part is the written," he said as he started to pass out the written tests. Everyone took their tests silently, and not a sound other than moving pencils could be heard in the room. While the written test was given an hour to complete, everyone had more or less finished their tests in less than a half hour. Collecting the tests, he calmly moved the students to another room for their Taijutsu exam. This seemed to be a tournament-style exam, and Kamiko flinched a little at the thought of having to fight the kunoichi of the class. She also knew that she had no choice but to participate as she signed up for this, and she knew that she couldn't outright refuse. Why did I decide to do it this way again? She thought to herself. We will now begin the Taijutsu portion of the exam. This will be a tournament among your classmates. Girls will fight girls and boys will be fighting boys. Any questions? Kamiko smirked. Isn't that kind of sexist? Kunoichis don't get a chance to only fight another kunoichi on the battlefield, so why are we only allowed to fight other girls? She called out, getting everyone in the room's attention. Well, Kamiko, since you brought it up, we only allow the girls to fight other girls in this tournament because we are trying to test their combat preparedness and get a good idea of where they stand. Unfortunately, many kunoichis at this stage of their lives just aren't up to fighting boys. Hiruzen said, trying to placate the demon in disguise. I can see your concern, and given the fact that every girl in this class with the exception of me and Hinata over here has been dieting, it is well warranted. However, I can't see how testing them only against their own gender tests their battle preparedness when they only fight the same gender. The current shinobi force is dominated by males, so the chances are they will have approximately a 10-1 chance of fighting a male shinobi instead of a kunoichi. Plus, had they not dieted, then they would be more than ready for that kind of combat. Furthermore, they need to learn the consequences of their actions in regards to their shinobi training and career. Kamiko reasoned. The Sandaime groaned. He could already see that he was fighting a losing battle. He knew that the fox was worried about having to fight opponents below her skill level and wanted to fight Naruto to show the world how much he had been holding back. Glancing at the parents who had gathered to watch his sight, he knew that there would be those unhappy with whatever he chose. It was then that the fox's words came back, insinuating that he had been letting everyone walk all over him for the last 12 years. Very well. It will be a full tournament for the whole class, not just the genders. Haruka nodded and noticed that some of the girls who looked confident coming and no longer had the same confident air about them. Some, like Sakura, looked downright terrified at the thought. Well, I suppose that they truly do need to learn the hard way exactly what dieting does to the body. I've been trying all year to get it through their heads, he thought. Very well. The first match will be DBC, Fights and Revelations. The first match will be between Kamiko and Kiba. Kamiko grinned sadistically as she noticed the perverted look on the Inuzuka's face. As they climbed into the ring together, Kiba couldn't help but grin at his fortune. Kamiko, right. How about we make a deal? I win and you have to go on a date with me. Kamiko tilted her head and appeared to think about it. Only if you agree to castrate yourself if I win, you shameless pervert. She declared. Kiba gulped and shook his head. They took their stances and waited for the signal to begin. Begin. Haruka declared. No sooner than the word was out of his mouth, Kiba was laying on his back outside of the ring and Kamiko was staring at her fingers. Boring. She whispered and turned to leave the ring. No one said a word as they watched the girl take a seat next to the blonde. No one had seen the vixen move. Kiba was lying on his back with his mouth open in shock. He could have sworn that something had hit him. Shaking his head, Haruka looked down at the clipboard and cleared his throat. Next match, Aimi vs Kenji. As the two took their stances, it was quite evident that Aimi was nervous. Out of all the girls in the class, she considered herself one of the strongest. However, when the whole class including the boys were included, she was easily the weakest outside of Sakura. As they took their positions, Haruka felt himself groan. He knew how this would end. Begin. Like the first match, it ended quickly. Kenji made the first move and threw a punch that Aimi barely blocked and then planted his foot into her abdomen, sending her out of the ring. Winner. Kenji. As soon as he was announced the winner, Kenji strode over and offered Aimi his hand. Need some help up? The girl just nodded her head, trying to hide her tears. Her movements had been more sluggish than normal and she knew now that her diet had been to blame. The last time that she had eaten had been lunch the day before, and not all that much either. Haruka was slightly surprised at the gesture, but pleased to know that the children had at least learned good sportsmanship. Next match. Ino vs Seino. Ino could feel her stomach flop as she stepped into the ring. Seino was considered one of the top 3 in Taijutsu. The only one that had ever defeated him was Sasuke. There was no way that she was winning this, especially after skipping breakfast. What a stupid thing to do. Why did I skip breakfast? She cried mentally. As soon as Haruka yelled begin, she had to hastily dodge a swift right hook. One of the problems when facing Seino was his overwhelming power, and he was among the fastest in the class. The match itself was uneventful as it consisted mainly of Ino dodging attacks and Seino continuously throwing them. She's not that bad, however, in her current condition, she won't be able to dodge them forever, Kamiko thought to herself. Sure enough, Ino was unable to dodge another punch that caught her in the stomach, but despite that, she managed to keep herself in the ring. As Seino charged in for another attack, Ino smirked as she got an idea. Ducking, she threw her foot out and tripped the boy. His momentum carried him out of bounds and won her the match. As Iruka called the match, she stood gingerly as the pain from where he had hit her made itself known. In the stands, the parents were watching in fascination as they saw the class standings begin to mean less and less. Many of them were second-guessing the advice that they had given their children. Even Inoichi found himself second-guessing how much independence he had allowed Ino to have. He knew that she should not have had any problems with that match had she taken her training seriously. I'll have to remedy that when I get home, he thought to himself. Next match. Hachiro vs Hinata, Iruka called. Hachiro smirked confidently as he stepped into the ring. Hinata was lucky to win a lot of her matches in the past, and she was so timid. In his mind, it was an easy win. On the other hand, Hinata seemed preoccupied with her thoughts. She had been unable to get Kamiko off of her mind since that morning. Who was she? How did Naruto-kun know her? Why did they seem so close? The only solution she could come up with was that Naruto was interested in her, maybe even dating her. I can see why she was so fast and defeated Kiba with one hit. Well, if Naruto likes her because she is strong, then maybe all I have to do is beat her and he'll notice me. In order to do that, I have to win this match and the next match just to be able to fight her. Mind made up, Hinata looked up at the Hachiro and bowed respectfully. However, her eyes held a steely determination that had never been there before. As he called for the match to start, Hinata braced herself as Hachiro flew at her fist out. While she couldn't use her Byakugans for this match, she could use the Juken. Sidestepping his initial attack, Hinata quickly went on the offensive once his guard was down. It only took 7 strikes for him to lose enough of his balance for Hinata to knock him out of the ring. Her victory came as a surprise to many of the spectators, students and parents alike, as no one had expected her to take Hachiro down so quickly or efficiently. Next match, Iruka called with a proud smile on his face. Shikamaru vs Asuka. Troublesome. Shikamaru groaned as he entered the ring. Since all of their scores had been wiped out, that meant that he couldn't fight half-assed like normal. As soon as the match started, he sighed, dodging a sloppily thrown fist and kneed Asuka in the stomach, and then quickly followed through by grabbing her hand and throwing her from the ring. It was more effort than he had anticipated, making Todi already, but he had no choice. He stepped out of the ring slowly and returned to his place as Iruka announced him the victor. Shino vs Irie. That match was just as short-lived as Shino had no issue subduing his opponent, ending the match in less than a minute. Choji vs Ina. Despite Ina making a valiant attempt against Choji, she was unable to overpower the Akimichi and was defeated herself. No one could help but groan at the lack of talent coming from the girls in the tournament. Hiroshi vs Sakura, Iruka called. Then flinched, knowing that Sakura was going to be rather annoying. Sakura was not as confident as she would have been with Mizuki assisting her. She knew that most of her physical grades had been doctored so that she would be able to get on the same team as Sasuke, and with the current standings being wiped clean, that meant that the chances of getting her dream team were next to none. Hiroshi, on the other hand, wasn't very happy. Iruka-sensei, is there any reason why I have to fight a girl that doesn't even know how to throw a proper punch? He asked, making everyone sweat. Sorry Hiroshi, that is just how the matches lined up. Groaning, the boy stepped into the ring and readied himself for the fastest and most boring fight he would ever have. No sooner than Iruka said begin, it was over. Hiroshi had caught Sakura with a backhand, sending her from the ring. Winner Hiroshi. Next match, Goro vs Sasuke. Unfortunately for Goro, the Uchiha clan's interceptor fist was more suited to counter most Taijutsu, let alone grappling styles, and he lost quickly. Winner Sasuke, Iruka called. He was all ready to call Sasuke the winner because he had never lost a fight. Perhaps that is because of a lack of challenges, he thought to himself. Haru vs Emi. The match was quite similar to the previous minus the grappling. Despite being a girl and just coming off her diet, Emi was able to emerge victorious over Haru. The knowledge that he had been defeated by one of Sasuke's former fangirls didn't bode well with Haru, but he accepted his loss anyway. Akio vs Daiki. A similar battle to Emi and Haru's ended abruptly when Daiki managed to slip past Akio's defenses and punch him in the face hard enough to knock him out. Hideki vs Jiro. The match lasted all of 30 seconds before Jiro was able to force Hideki to forfeit. Next match, Kokoro vs Kaido. Once again the match didn't last long as Kaido swiftly knocked his opponent out. Winner. Kaido. Naruto vs Katsu. Iruka called and most of the chatter died down. No one had forgotten the speed that Naruto had used against Sakura last they had seen him, and many were anxious to see just how much stronger he truly was to the mask he portrayed. Unfortunately, as soon as Iruka said to begin, the match was over. Much like Kamiko, Naruto had moved so fast that his opponent had not had time to even block or move. Due to this, most of his classmates didn't even see Naruto's match. Winner. Naruto, Iruka called and then quickly headed over to check on the defeated students. After making sure that none of them needed to see a doctor, Kiba having already been seen by the school's medic, he moved to begin the next round. Kamiko vs Kenji. As with her first match, Kamiko defeated her opponent before they could react. Ino vs Hinata. Having seen Hinata's previous fights and having defeated her before in class, Ino would have been confident in her fight, but after Hinata's first match, she knew that she couldn't get cocky. Unfortunately, she was still defeated when Hinata went on the attack as soon as the match was called, and her first strike landed in the exact same spot as Seino's had. I guess different eating habits and dieting really do affect our skills. Well, that impossible competition for Naruto, Ino thought to herself. It was no secret to anyone how Hinata felt about Naruto and the possibility that he was interested in someone that they had never met before and was skilled enough to end their fights with at least Jonin level skill must have caused Hinata to become insanely jealous. Shikamaru vs Shino. As both entered the ring they began to eye each other up. Neither clan was known for taijutsu. For the most part, it was both of their clan's weaknesses. However, in comparison, the Aburam clan had a smaller advantage over the Nara clan in that field. As the fight started it quickly became obvious that the two boys were merely testing one another looking for openings in each other's form. After nearly a full 4 minutes of back and forth testing Shikamaru's side, he was at a crossroad. He could continue the fight and move on in the tournament, but then he would be exhausted and most likely lose the next fight. Or he could forfeit and let Shino take the win. In that case, no one would be exhausted and Shino would undoubtedly win the next match. Options weighed. Shikamaru forfeited the match. Joji vs Hiroshi. The match was fairly even as the two fought, but Hiroshi could quickly tell that the Akimichi was holding back. Perhaps not on purpose, but he was, and that was all he needed to get the upper hand in the fight. Ducking under another of Joji's punches, he swept the boy's feet out from under him and then quickly pushed him out of the ring, winning the match. Sasuke vs Emi. Despite her previous win, Emi was nowhere near Sasuke's level, and that was shown as she lost in less than 30 seconds. There was something different about the way that Sasuke was fighting today that hinted that he had a specific opponent in mind. Aiki vs Jiro. This match was perhaps the longest yet as the two combatants attempted to out-strategize the other. Despite this there was little Jiro could do as he was knocked off his feet and the wind knocked out of him long enough for Iruka to call the match. Smiling and taking Daiki's outstretched hand he left the ring with the next match on his mind. Ido vs Naruto. Again there was no contest as Naruto ended his match swiftly. He was in no mode to fool around and he knew that he needed to focus on the upcoming fight with Sasuke. Kamiko vs Hinata. Hinata was even more determined to defeat Kamiko now. She refused to allow anyone else to have Naruto. Besides she knew nothing of this girl and wasn't sure that she could trust her around Naruto. As the match began she threw a flurry of attacks at the vixen and forced Kamiko to fight on the defensive for the first time since the tournament began. While she could have ended the fight quickly, Kamiko knew exactly why the Hyuga was so focused on her attacks. Hinata saw her as a threat to her crush. Evading another palm strike, Kamiko managed to close the gap between them and smirked as she swiftly pulled Hinata's left arm behind her. I have no interest in him like that at the time. I have however been with him from birth. We are merely friends. I can't and won't hurt him either. However, a little showing off never hurt anyone, right? She whispered in Hinata's ear before having to dodge a left elbow. Hinata merely narrowed her eyes at the fox and resumed her Jukin stance. Once again she flew onto the offensive only to be forced to switch to defensive tactics as Kamiko started her own attack. Unfortunately, it didn't last long as Kamiko broke through Hinata's guard and delivered a swift blow to the back of the neck, knocking her out. Sighing she eased the girl onto the ground outside of the ring and returned to her spot next to Naruto, who was shaking his head at her in amusement. But she was jealous of us and highly suspicious of me. I felt as if I had to try and ease her suspicions. The fox whispered to her vessel. Naruto merely rolled his eyes. Sasuke vs Daiki. Despite managing to land a soft blow to Sasuke's side, Daiki was unable to break through his guard a second time and lost the match. As there is an uneven number of students, Naruto advances to the next round, Iruka called out, making Naruto whine at the free pass. Kamiko only laughed at the boy. Many humans would be thrilled to have a free pass in a tournament. Kamiko vs Shino. As the two took their places Shino's eyes narrowed as his Kikai told him to be very cautious of the girl before him. They were telling him that she wasn't normal and that she was very dangerous. Their assumption proved correct as he was forced onto the defensive from the start. Despite the fact that she looked ready for a formal ceremony, she was very swift and her form flawless. Despite his best attempts at finding an opening, he was unable to and found himself outside of the ring. Reaching down, the vixen offered him a hand which he accepted cautiously. Sasuke vs Naruto, Iruka called and then groaned. All the fights in the past had turned out the same between those two. Naruto was usually defeated in a few seconds and Sasuke would gloat over it. However, he knew that Naruto would be able to hold his own this time and had no idea how Sasuke would react to having someone go toe-to-toe with him. Someone that he considered weak. Just give up, dope. You know that you can't win. Sasuke taunted. Don't count your chickens before the eggs hatch, itcha. Naruto countered calmly, angering the raven-eyed boy. Naruto had dared to talk back to him. He had never done that. Usually, he flew into a temper tantrum and declared that this time was different or some such nonsense. As Iruka began the match, Sasuke's eyes widened as he was forced to block a very swift right hook to the face. Naruto was nearly 3 times faster than he had anticipated and it had taken him off guard. Regaining his balance as he had almost toppled from the force behind the blow, he swung back only to meet air as the blonde ducked and aimed another blow at his abdomen. This one connected. The wind knocked out of him temporarily, he was unable to block the knee that crashed into his nose or the spin kick that sent him flying out of the ring and across the room. He only stopped moving when his back met the wall with a loud thud. He could hear the wall crack under the force of the impact and again his breath was stolen from him. Somehow, someway the dope had just defeated him. The whole room was in shock at what they had just witnessed and honestly had no idea how to react. The apparent dead last had just defeated the favorite for Rookie of the Year without taking any damage. Iruka could honestly say that he was proud of his younger brother. Finally, the match that most of the adults were anticipating began, Kamiko vs Naruto. Are you ready to show everyone just how good you are? The fox asked as they took their places across from each other. Grinning, the blonde nodded and they both waited for Iruka to begin the match. As soon as he did, they flew at each other, barely visible to the shinobi in the room, and began to exchange a flurry of punches and kicks that were either blocked or deflected. It was apparent to all that Naruto had been holding back more than anyone had believed. The two were matching each other's attacks as if they had sparred every day their entire lives. It was taking all of their concentration to stay in the ring and as such, they were forcing themselves to hold back. If they had been fighting at full strength with just Taijutsu, then the ring would have been demolished already. As Naruto jumped out of the range of one of Kamiko's attacks, he couldn't help but sweat drop as her fist impacted the floor and caused a spider web of cracks to spread from the point of impact. However, she didn't let up, quickly chasing after him and throwing yet another punch at the boy, forcing him to throw himself to the side to avoid it. As the shinobi watched in disbelief, the Sandame realized that the fox had every intention of destroying the ring so that they wouldn't be limited in space. He could already feel his headache returning as they continued a fight more befitting of enemy shinobi than that of friends. The back and forth never let up as Naruto was able to temporarily change the tide of battle by gaining the upper hand, only to lose it just as quickly. As Naruto was forced to jump into the air to avoid another attack, he cursed as the fox appeared above him and delivered a swift blow to his abdomen, sending him flying to the floor. The impact made a crater which caused dust to fly into the air and obscure everyone's vision. However, the sounds of fighting could still be heard as the two continued their clash. As the dust began to clear, they could see the two standing across from each other, and as they struggled to see who had the upper hand, Iruka's voice called out, catching everyone's attention. The winner of the match is DBC, Teams and Rivals, and the winner is Iruka, called out, getting everyone's attention. Everyone looked on anxiously as the two combatants started to come into view as the smoke cleared. Both seemed rather tired and yet they were smiling at one another. Neither. This match has ended in a tie. The announcement took many people by surprise. The Sandame nodded in approval. He knew that if he had allowed the two to continue their fight, the academy may not have survived the aftermath. He also knew that in all honesty, the Kyuubi had been holding back. She would have no choice but to. There was no way that the vixen had managed to train Naruto up to her level, even with Minato and Kushina's help. Well, damn, Kamiko huffed as she stood upright. She had intended to fight a little while longer, but it seemed that the old fool had different plans. Naruto grinned back at her, and she could tell that he was unhappy as well. Neither one of them had wanted to stop fighting, and the fact that they had ended the match before they could get serious was annoying to both of them. Well, that concludes the Taijutsu portion of the exam. If the students would follow me back into the main building, we will move on to the next phase. Iruka announced as he turned to leave the room. Quietly, perhaps due to shock, the class followed after him. The Genjutsu portion of the exam went quickly and without any problems. Their test to demonstrate mastery over their kunai and shuriken also went without a hitch. However, the class was still left in shock as the dead last aced both portions with no difficulty. When they finally returned to their classroom, Iruka began calling each of the students into the next room to finish their exams. It was then that the class seemed to snap out of their stupor. How the hell did you do that, dope? Sasuke nearly shouted. Not even he could move that fast, and yet the idiot had vanished completely from sight. Not only that, but he had defeated him without even trying. It's called training, you might want to try it sometime. I hear that it can make you stronger. Naruto retorted from where he was stretched out reading a book with Kamiko next to him. The vixen merely snickered and began inspecting her sleeve. You are fixing the damage to my clothes later, brat. She scolded, making everyone's sweat drop. Naruto glanced over at her and smiled. Yeah, sure, Kimi-chan. The room was dead silent as they noticed the bond between the two. Naruto, who had never made a friend or seemingly got close to anyone, mostly due to the fact that no one wanted to be close to him, had a very close relationship to a girl that they had never seen before. Narrowing his eyes at the blonde, Sasuke opened his mouth to retort when he was called into the next room for his test. Sakura was also keeping her mouth shut as well, mostly in fear of what Naruto would do to her if she didn't. The memory of her sailing through the air several days prior was still fresh in her mind, and she didn't want to repeat the experience. The silence was unnerving to most people as they expected yet another outburst between the Pink Cat and Naruto. It wasn't long before Naruto was called into the next room. As he left the room, the Sasuke and Sakura smirked, thinking that the clone would trip him up like usual. "Hey, Haruka-sensei." Naruto chirped at the Chunin. Haruka beamed at his little brother. He had never seen Naruto perform so well before, and he was proud of the progress he was showing. Although he was a little miffed that Naruto hadn't felt that he could tell him of the strength that he was holding back. Why? He thought to himself. Why did he feel the need to hold back, and why won't Sandaime-sama tell me anything about this Kamiko girl that he seems very close to? He thought to himself and then jumped as Naruto peered up at him innocently from his lap. Glancing to where the blonde had been standing were 4 identical copies playing cards. Haruka hadn't even felt the chakra fluctuation. "Very good, Naruto. Now I need to see the replacement and the transformation jutsu," he said just as the blonde switched with his clipboard again. Before the Chunin could say anything else, the cards that the shadow clones were playing with burst into smoke and another clone took its place. "That good enough, Haruka-sensei?" Naruto asked, grinning cheekily. The Chunin gave a bright smile and nodded. "Back in the classroom, so who are you? Why are you so interested in the dope?" Sasuke nearly barked at the girl who had been inspecting the damage to her kimono. "Kamiko, as it was said earlier, and who I am interested in is none of your business. Besides, at the very least, he uses his ears and retains the information that they pick up instead of discarding it as irrelevant until it becomes important enough to need investigating." Kamiko replied, not even looking up. Sasuke growled at the girl as Sakura sneered. "Are you in love with the idiot?" "Sorry, but I doubt he even knows what that is because he is so dense." Sakura nearly hissed. She was pissed at being humiliated in the tournament that her standing in the class was pathetic now that Mizuki had been arrested. Of course he knows what true love is. Luckily for him, he hasn't fallen into the puppy crush love or the gold-digging power-hungry love. So I guess in that regard he is better than you will ever be. "Oh wait, he already proved that, didn't he?" Kamiko countered. Sakura was seeing red. "Where do you come from then? I have never seen you around the village before. In fact, I am sure that no one in the class has seen you in the village before," Sasuke demanded. "The mountains," was the casual reply, making everyone's sweat drop. "There are a lot of mountains in the world." "Which ones?" Sakura shrieked in disbelief. Kamiko smirked to herself. She had no idea that torturing the humans in Naruto's class would be so fun. Plus she wasn't even touching them. "The ones that go straight up in the air," she replied, a small ghost smile making it to her face. Shikamaru glanced over at the arguing triad and groaned. Sadly, Sakura and Sasuke had a point. He had never seen Kamiko in the village and there were a lot of mountains in the world. However, something about the girl made him suspicious and it seemed like he wasn't the only one. Hinata was eyeing the girl cautiously. Most likely because of how close she is to Naruto, he thought to himself. "All the mountains go up in the air." Sasuke snapped. "Do they? Or is that just an illusion? Who is to say what up and down are? We could very well be seeing things backward and not even know it. Besides, when you look from a bat's perspective, everything is upside down until they start flying." Kamiko pointed out, making Sasuke and Sakura gape at the vixen. Even Shikamaru had to admit that was very clever. "Where on the map are these mountains?" Sasuke growled. Surely there was no way she could be sarcastic about that, right? "The front of the map. It seems pointless to place a mountain range on the back where no one is looking now, doesn't it?" she replied mischievously. She absolutely loved the way that the Uchiha squirmed. "What are their names? Mountains? Or I suppose you could use rock formations. What country are they in? What era map are we using? The borders have been redrawn quite a few times, you know." Before the raven-haired Avenger could retort, Naruto walked back in the room with his headband affixed to his head and grinned at the vixen. "He says you're up, Kimi-chan." Nodding, the vixen stood and left the room, leaving a fuming pair behind. "Oh, where is your friend from?" Sasuke nearly screamed at the top of his lungs. He normally didn't lose his composure so easily, but the vixen knew what buttons to push. "The mountains," came the reply. "With Haruka and Kamiko." "Now then, I will need you to demonstrate," Haruka began. "Arg!" came a very frustrated scream from the other room. Kamiko couldn't help herself as she burst into laughter at the scream. "What was that?" Haruka demanded. An emo prick in his natural habitat. Kamiko snickered. The Chunin twitched a little and then refocused on the exam. I need you to show mastery of the transformation, the bunshin, and the replacement. He instructed the girl who groaned. First we need to get something straight. I don't transform, I shapeshift. So does Naruto. Second, I have no need for the replacement, and even if I did there is no way in hell you can fit a mountain into this room, and that is the smallest thing that I can replace with given my reserves to control ratio. No, I never even bothered to get that under control as I have no need to. Third, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. She said, creating 20 shadow clones. Iruka was blinking at the girl in shock. He had never seen or heard of anything like this in his life. He didn't even know that it was possible to replace with a mountain, and yet the girl was claiming to be able to do it all the time. Glancing over at the other instructor and the Hokage, he watched as the Sandame nodded. Very well, let's see your shapeshift, Iruka replied to the vixen. Before he could prepare himself, the vixen had dispelled her clones, and in the center of the room was a 7-foot-tall version of the nine-tailed fox. Everyone in the room gaped and many of the people in the room contemplated running. Before a panic could break out, the vixen turned back and shrugged. Where I am from, foxes are sacred, so no, I didn't see a problem with that. She replied to Iruka's silent question. Taking a breath, the Chunin nodded and then groaned internally. Between her and Naruto, I am not living to 30. It didn't take much longer before the whole class had been tested, and despite the fact that everyone passed, Sakura and Kiba almost didn't. It was clear to the examiners and the Jonin that the two had taken the easy way through their schoolwork and they had paid for it. Whether they could actually do what they needed to do now that they knew that the easy way was not going to get them ahead in life was still unclear. It was unnecessary to point out that the Inuzuka matriarch was none too pleased with the results of her youngest and was going to lie into him the second that he got home. Alright everyone, I want all of you to meet back here in 1 week on October 12th for your team assignments, Iruka said before dismissing the group. As everyone got up to leave, the Chunin found his eyes drawn to Naruto and his strange companion. He was still curious about the girl's identity, but when he asked the Sandame, he was told that anything about the girl's past was on a need-to-know basis and he didn't need to know. While he respected the Sandame's wishes, he was not happy about it. After all, Naruto was like a baby brother to him and the girl was a wild card with no origins that may just get him killed. He could only hope that the Sandame knew what he was doing. The week passed by quickly for many of the students. They spent much of their time making sure that they had proper clothing and equipment for when they started their training as a new shinobi of the Hidden Leaf. For Naruto and Kamiko, the time was passed by constant spars and training exercises, council meetings and dodging the three people that seemed to be intent on stalking them the whole time. Ditching Sasuke and Sakura was easy as they were horrible at tracking and their stealth skills needed a lot of work. Losing Hinata as a tail was much harder. The girl was damn near undetectable sometimes and as a result, they almost lost track of her once or twice. Even Kamiko had to admit that the girl was good. She's tailing us again. Kamiko sighed in slight irritation to her companion who looked to be in another world. Well, then why don't we invite her to train with us? Maybe she will stop trying to hide. Naruto suggested. Secretly, he just wanted to spend some time with the lavender-eyed angel. Kamiko rolled her eyes as she knew exactly why he had made that suggestion. Now that the mask was gone and the village was on notice, he had no intention of hiding his feelings for the girl and wanted to get to know her better. Naruto, do you think that is a good idea? His mother asked quietly. The blonde nearly jumped out of his skin as the woman's voice filled his mind. His parents had been so quiet that he had nearly forgotten that they were there. You scared me, Mom. He accused, making the Redeed laugh. Of course, I do. She's just curious and worried that there is something between Kimmy and me. If she sees what we do all day, it may motivate her to get stronger. At the same time, I get to spend time with her as I see no reason why we can't help her with her training. Isn't that what shinobi do? Help each other to improve so that the village as a whole is stronger? Naruto questioned his parents who beamed with pride. That is true, Naru-chan. She does indeed need assistance in her training, as I don't see Hiashi helping in any way, shape or form, Minato replied. Naruto grinned and looked over at Kamiko who nodded. She had been listening into the whole conversation and had to admit that the boy had made a compelling argument. As the blonde moved away from his companion, he had the biggest of smiles. Hinata had been trying to tail the two for a while now and it was much harder than it sounded. They were not only fast but crafty as well. As hard as she tried, they always seemed to escape her and she would spend the rest of the day trying to find them. She knew that she should be at home working on her skills, but the woman that was with Naruto-kun bothered her. Who was she? Where did she come from? How did she really know Naruto? Why were they so close? Why did the Sandame seem so keen on giving in to her suggestive demands? There were too many questions and not nearly enough time to find the answers. What with the team assignments looming, she was afraid that the only time that she would have to investigate would be when they were both in the village together. She decided, that would not be nearly enough. She watched as her crush broke away from his constant companion and blinked in confusion. It seemed almost as if he was walking straight for her. That couldn't be plausible though, right? Just as Naruto reached the girl, he picked up on the other two tails and growled. They were starting to get rather annoying, and in the last few days even worse in their frustration due to constant failure. Shrugging mentally, he looked at the red-faced Hyuga and found himself blushing a little himself. It would be the first time that he allowed himself to talk to her outside of class, and even then he had limited it to what was necessary. "Hey Hinata. Kimi-chan and I want to know if you would like to join us in our training," Naruto asked with genuine curiosity. Me?" she squeaked. She hadn't expected the invite and she was startled that he knew her name. She had always thought that she was invisible to him. Yet here he was asking him to train with him. "Yeah. I think that we would both benefit from the training, and to be honest, I always wanted to get to know you as a friend and not just a classmate that I barely speak to," Naruto confessed. Hinata's head was whirling as she tried to wrap her mind around the information. Naruto-kun had always wanted to get to know her better and he thought that she could somehow benefit his training despite how strong he already was. "Are you sure she wouldn't mind?" Hinata asked cautiously. "She's fine with it. Trust me Hinata, Kimi and I are just friends. We both desperately need your help too because our chakra control is Naruto trailed off blushing. I would love to," she stuttered. Nodding, Naruto led her back to the vixen and turned his head to look at the other two tails. Sticking his tongue out, he wrapped his arm around the heiress. He and the vixen vanished from sight. Sasuke and Sakura cursed to themselves. They did this every time that they tried to tail them. Sakura took off trying to find them while Sasuke turned and headed home. He knew that it was pointless. If the past few days had taught him anything, it was that the blonde could hide wherever he wanted to. However, it bothered him now more than ever because they had decided to invite the mouse to go with them. That meant that she would benefit from whatever method they were using to get stronger and he wouldn't. Mind made up, he decided that he would try to corner Hinata instead. She would probably be easier to find and question. As soon as the blonde released her waist, Hinata stumbled back redder than she had ever been. The way that he had grabbed her had been sudden and she had no time to prepare. The experience had left her breathless and somewhat concerned. "Welcome to our personal training ground at the Uzumaki estate. My clan's compound. Sorry about that, but Sasuke and Sakura were trying to follow us and I didn't want them to know that I lived here, so yeah," Naruto said somewhat awkwardly. Hinata's head snapped up as she looked around. The training field was massive and didn't look like it had been used at all. The Uzumaki clan were masters at Fuinjutsu. There are seals on the training field that repairs itself after 30 minutes of inactivity, or they can be activated manually. Kamiko replied to Hinata's unanswered question. "Now then, the first thing that we have to do is assess where you are completely and get you out of that stuffy jacket. That way you don't die of heat stroke. From there we can make a personalized training plan just for you." Hinata gulped. Somehow she had the feeling that if she trained with these two, she wouldn't be able to do much of anything else. However, she gazed at the vixen with determination. She had no intention of letting her take Naruto-kun away without a fight. She would get stronger so that he would notice her more. The rest of the week flew by and soon enough the genin arrived at their classroom, anxious to know how they would be working with. Many of the students wanted to be placed with their friends and had not honestly considered that there was the chance of not being with them. The few remaining fangirls all wanted to be placed with Sasuke and as such were bickering with one another. Sitting quietly near the window, the object of their affection was silently fuming. Somehow, Hinata had managed to avoid him as well. He could tell that she had been training through the way that she was always exhausted at night as she entered the Hyuga compound. However, the secret to the dobe's sudden increase in skills still eluded him. As Iruka walked into the room, he looked around and smiled at the gathered students. The next time that he saw them, they would either be returning for another year at the academy or it would be as full-fledged shinobi. However, as he scanned the crowd, he couldn't seem to find Naruto, Hinata or Kamiko anywhere. And after a second pass, he jumped slightly as they seemingly materialized into seats in the back of the room. All three were smiling and apparently getting along. Furthermore, it seemed as if Hinata had discarded her oversized jacket in favor of a proper battle kimono. She looked much more prepared to be a shinobi now. Clearing his throat, he quickly caught the attention of everyone in the room. "Alright everyone, first I want to say that I am proud of all of you and look forward to being able to stand by you as equals. Now that that is over, there are a few things that need to be said before I announce your assignments. All of you will be assigned to a squad that typically consists of 3 genins and 1 jonin. As a result, the teams were formatted with skills, balance, and effectiveness on them. Some of them were harder to form than others and as a result may seem off. The teams are final and as such, they will not be changed. Now, Team 1 is Kenji, Imi, and Haru under Narumin. The aforementioned genin didn't seem to have a problem with that. Team 2. Seino, Ina, and Akio under Akimichi Meriton. Team 3. Hichiro, Goro, and Kokoro under Aburam Muta. Team 4. Hiroshi, Akio and Irie under Tessen Tajido. Team 5. Daiki, Hideki and Asuka under Takaju Torikai. Team 6. Jiro, Kaido, and Sakura under Yuhi Kurenai. As soon as this team was announced, a loud cry of fuck echoed through the room as Jiro and Kaido began repeatedly banging their heads on their desks, crying about having horrible luck. Everyone in the room sweat dropped at the antics except for Sakura, who felt tears welling up. She wasn't going to be with her precious Asuka-kun. Team 7. Sasuke, Kiba and Ami under Ibisu. As soon as Ami heard the announcement, she let out a whimper. She was stuck on a team with an overconfident pervert and a self-centered emo. Granted, at one point she had been a Sasuke fangirl, but the exam and Hinata's outburst a week and a half ago had made her rethink her position and reasoning for wanting to be a ninja. Team 8. Katsu, Shino and Sai under Hyuga Takuma. Team 9 is still in rotation. Team 10. Ino, Shikamaru and Choji under Saratobi Asuma. Team 11. Naruto, Hinata and Kamiko under Hada Kakashi. Looking up from the list, he twitched to see the reactions of the students. Most of them were fine with their assignment, although some seemed less than thrilled. You have an hour for lunch and then meet back here where your jonins will be picking you up. Haruka declared and turned to leave. Haruka-sensei, if I may, who is this Sai person? Shikamaru called out. He had never heard of this person, and the fact that there were now two people that had popped out of nowhere was quite alarming to him. Sai is a genin who has been waiting for a new team as his previous teammates were reassigned, either due to promotion, injury or death, Haruka responded. In truth, he really didn't know who the kid was either. However, he wasn't going to question it either. He had learned that there were things that he just wasn't cleared to know. He merely chalked this up to one of them. DBC. First team meeting. Hinata and Kamiko were playing a game of shogi when Kakashi finally arrived to pick up his team. He was not only 3 hours late but also seemingly uninterested. He had been surprised when he had not received Sasuke on his team, but when he asked he was told that it would be safer this way. He felt bad that he couldn't train Obito's relative and try to make up for everything that happened, but he decided that he would just have to accept the Sandame's decision if he only knew. Hey sensei. Could you at least try to be on time next time? Some of us do actually have lives and things to do with our time. Naruto said without looking down from his meditation on the ceiling. Kakashi did a double take to ensure that he wasn't seeing things, and sure enough the blonde genin was sitting cross-legged on the ceiling. Looking over at the desk, he saw the two females that he had been assigned playing a game of shogi that didn't seem anywhere near ending. How long have they been playing? He asked in curiosity. Naruto snickered a little and opened his eyes. You would know had you been on time, was his response. The laugh that followed was enough to make the girls look up and glare at the tardy sensei. Standing and sealing the board away to preserve the game, Kamiko walked over to the jonin and fixed him with a blank stare. If you intend to waste 3 hours of our day on waiting for you to arrive, tell us now so that we can get something productive done. Or better yet, hand the team over to someone else. You of all people should be aware of how important punctuality is for a ninja, Haddock. No, by the way, I will not watch my tone with you. In the time that you took to get here, Naruto and Hinata could have moved on to the next phase of some of their training. For Naruto, that would have included more chakra control exercises, which he is in desperate need of. She lectured the jonin. Kakashi blinked in surprise. The Sandame had said that he had been given a unique genin and team, and he hadn't known what he had meant then. Now, however, he believed he could see why. The girl wasn't afraid to speak her mind or order him around if it meant getting the point across. Sandame Sama said that there was something you wanted to tell me. He said, narrowing his eyes at the genin. Something about her was off and he didn't know what it was, but it was making him uneasy. Should you gain my trust, then I will tell you. However, as of now, there is no respect outside of what your skill level is. Plus the amount of knowledge that you could impart on this team, given your extensive history as a shinobi and the vast amount of knowledge that you have picked up over the years. She retorted. Somehow Kakashi felt that he should have just shown up when he was supposed to. Shrugging, he turned to leave the room. Looking over his shoulder, he called out to the aggravated genin in the room. See you on the roof. With that, he shunshined out of the room. Kamiko felt like punching the man. He had wasted their time only to show up, demand answers, and then tell them to meet him somewhere else. Deep breaths, Kimi-chan. Naruto soothed as he heard the rant that his parents started internally. This wasn't going to go well. Already he was having to soothe the 3 most powerful beings on the planet, and 2 of them lived in his head. Arriving in the roof not even a minute later, the 3 genins looked over at the jonin, and after only a minute, Kamiko had snatched the book he had been reading out of his hand and had torched it. Do try to keep your perverse habits to yourself. She snapped. Kakashi was staring at her in shock. Never had anyone done such a thing. Especially not to his precious book. Alright then, let's get started. Name, likes, dislikes, hobbies, hopes and dreams for the future. You first, Blondie. Kakashi snapped. Naruto grinned at the jonin and looked him right in the eye. Lead by example, sensei. came the reply. Kakashi almost faces planted at the answer. He had not expected that even though Iruka had warned him that Naruto and the girl had a habit of trying to annoy people to the point of snapping. Internally Kushina and Minato were laughing hysterically. They had not expected Naruto to do that and the look on Kakashi's face had been priceless. Had a Kakashi. My Lakesi have them. My Dislakesi have those too. My Habayas you are too young to know. My dream will irrelevant. He replied and Minato felt a few brain cells die at that answer. Did that boy not take being a ninja seriously anymore? Okay then. Nameu would already know that had you read the team file you were given. Lakesme who knows. Dislikas you. Habayas pissing people off and pranking them. Dream for the future you are too old to know that. Naruto replied making the silver-haired Jonin gape as his own tactic was used against him. Kamiko snickered at the reaction and cleared her throat. Name unimportant to you. Likes are torturing arrogant pricks and people who disinterested in the lives of the children that they were placed in charge of. Dislikes are perverts, incompetent fools, and weaklings. Hobbies are pissing people off and I sometimes eat annoying gnats. Dream for the future well I guess avoiding a true family reunion would be preferable. The vixen said making a chill go up Kakashi's back. You really should know our names already Kakashi-sensei. Also since we already know each other isn't that part redundant. My likes are not important to someone that has yet to earn my trust and my dislikes aren't any of your business at this point. My hobbies are for me to know and you to find out. My dreams are none of your business for as long as you remain disinterested in us and our progress. Hinata finished deciding to keep the theme game going. Silence hung in the air as the team stared at each other and Kakashi tried desperately to come up with a solution. They had seemingly taken an instant disliking and as a result had decided that he was not a trustworthy person to divulge their personal info to. He wasn't sure whether to be proud or annoyed. Right then fact of the matter is that none of you are genin yet. You still have to take the exam and there is a 66% chance of failure. Meet me he started but never finished as the vixen interrupted him. Do you have any prior engagements for the rest of the day because if you don't then there is no reason that the test can't be done now. She said making the Jonin sweat drop. Who was in charge of the team again? He was seriously doubting that it was him. No need to be like that. There are things that have to be arranged and I want to make sure that the three of you are ready. He tried to placate the vixen. We are as ready as proper shinobi should be. The question is are you ready? To be completely honest I don't think that you are even close to being ready for a genin team. However, out of all the prospects you were the most suited for preparing this team for the hardships that are coming. Do not make me regret choosing you as our Jonin. Kamiko snapped violently making Hinata and Kakashi's eyes widen in shock. They had no idea that Kamiko had been the one to select this squad. However, how she had that much authority over something like that as a new academy graduate was beyond them both. After a second Kakashi shook his head. Since you don't want to wait for tomorrow morning we will meet at training field 11 at 10 tonight for the exam. Don't blame me if you get hurt in the dark. Bring all of your gear and don't eat dinner. He snapped and vanished from sight. Was it wise to anger our Jonin like that? Hinata whispered. Wouldn't know. I haven't met our Jonin yet. Kamiko sneered at the place where the man had been. She had not expected the Jonin to be so carefree and pathetic. She had remembered him from when she had been sealed inside of Kushina and he had been far more reliable than that. But Kamiko-san he was. No Hinata that was a washed up has been that needs a reality check. One that we are going to give him and if he fails to meet my standards then we will be getting a new Jonin. Kamiko said knowing that the man had yet to leave the vicinity. Kakashi could feel himself grow red with rage. The girl was seriously pushing her luck and if she thought that he was going to let her get away with the insult then she was sorely mistaken. Leaving his perch he headed for the Hokage's office hoping to clear a few things up. Hinata make sure that you eat dinner. He is trying to weaken you for the test, no shinobi should ever go on a mission on an empty stomach. Kamiko instructed and the girl nodded. Turning she headed home to inform her father of her team placement. She just hoped that the Jonin and the vixen wouldn't kill each other tonight. Naruto and Kamiko headed in the opposite direction and groaned as they felt the annoying emo following them once again. It was going to be a long day. Sandame-sama, Kakashi said entering the room causing the rest of the occupants to groan. They had all gathered to give the Sandame a brief overview of their teams and their predictions based on first impressions, however, the meeting had been delayed by an hour because of the copy nin. I see you ignored my advice and met your team late. In all honesty, though I am surprised that Kamiko didn't tear you apart for that. The old man stated seeing the man's irritation. Kakashi felt his eye twitch again. Just who is that girl? How was it that she got to pick her own team? He asked. Hiruzen felt a headache start. He had hoped that the Nine Tails would keep that under wraps, but it seemed as if she felt the need to inform Kakashi that she was not fooling around at all. Kamiko's origins and purpose here in Konoha will be divulged to you Kakashi by her when she feels that you have gained enough trust to keep that information a secret. I can assure that she will not harm the village so long as she is not given cause to. Being allowed to select her own team was part of the deal that was made with her. He replied to the jonin, causing many to wonder about the girl themselves. I see. My apologies, Andame-sama. Kakashi said, trying to regain control of his temper. Unfortunately, it was not working. Alright then, shall we continue? As the genin made their way to the training field later that night, they felt themselves wondering about what kind of test they were going to receive from the irate jonin. Hiashi had not been pleased when Hinata told him that she would not be able to attend a clan function that evening as she had to be ready for her genin test. She just knew that the jonin was going to get an earful. As she had passed the academy, there was supposed to be an affair to recognize her as a full member of the Hyuga, however it was forced to be placed on hold. Though she had not been thrilled about the whole ceremony to get the clan crest tattooed on her. She felt that was taking her clan's arrogance to a new level. Just another form of branding. Shaking her head, she looked over and saw Kamiko and Naruto approaching at the same time that she was. Hey, Hinata-chan. Naruto called out to the heiress. Smiling to herself, she jogged over to meet them. Luckily for them, Kakashi showed up not even 3 minutes later, still irate as he had been earlier. Never took you to be one to hold grudges. Kamiko taunted the jonin, making him try to compose himself once more. Alright then. The three of you will have 1 hour to locate me, retrieve the bells that I have somewhere on my person, and return to this very spot. If any of you are not in your starting positions when the alarm rings, then you fail. Failure to retrieve the bells will also make you fail. I will be defending them, and should you make it back here before the alarm goes off, I will try to take them back. You may use any technique that you know and any weapons that you have on you. Begin. He snapped, disappearing from sight. Kamiko rolled her eyes and turned to the heiress, who was fidgeting. Try to find him with your Byakugans. He can't have gone far. Once you find him, try to locate the bells. She said, making the girl nod and shake away her nervousness. She had found that the vixen was stern yet fair during the time that she had been training with him. Furthermore, she had also learned that she was stronger than everyone in the village at the moment. She felt lucky that the fox had been willing to train her. However, she also knew that there was something that was being kept from her, probably to prevent her opinion of Naruto and Kamiko from changing before she had already made up her mind. It didn't take long before she managed to spot the jonin, and even less time to find the bells. I found him. But there are only 2 bells. Furthermore, he seems to be rigging traps everywhere in the forest. She reported. Kamiko snorted. He is underestimating us. Well, that will be dealt with quickly. Hinata, keep an eye on him and his movements. Report them to Naruto from a safe place. Naruto, I want you to disarm the traps and lead him back here. I will deal with retrieving the bells and knocking reality back into him. The two nodded and disappeared from the clearing, leaving the vixen alone with her thoughts. Hinata quickly found an outcropping that would provide shelter from most directions and force Kakashi to use more direct approaches to get to her. It was then that a thought popped into her head. How am I supposed to let Naruto-kun know what is going on? Hinata, are you in a safe position? Kamiko's voice rang out from seemingly next to her. Hi. How are you doing that? A modified version of a technique called the wind whisper justu. However, a flaw with that technique is that anyone can overhear the conversation if they listen hard enough. This technique allows the thoughts to be transmitted over long distances instead of voices. Something like telepathy. Neither you or Naruto are ready to learn it yet, the fox said, answering her question. So I don't have to talk out loud? Hinata asked, testing the jutsu. That is correct. Just think of what you want to say and to whom. If you want both of us to hear, don't focus on anyone. The formation that they were using was an experimental one that they had been working on. Hopefully, this field test would determine whether or not it was viable. Naruto was heading towards Kakashi's last known location when he received the information on the technique. Nodding to himself, he continued forward, stopping only when he needed to disarm a trap. Internally, Minato was lamenting how open Kakashi's strategies had become and wailing in despair. He had thought that he had trained Kakashi better than this. He had also noticed that his skills had slipped drastically as well. Kushina was sitting nearby trying to comfort her distraught husband. Naruto came to a stop a few feet from Kakashi and began to watch the jonin closely. The man was standing perfectly still, seemingly unaware of his surroundings. Narrowing his eyes, Naruto jumped backward off of the tree branch he was on as a massive water dragon slammed down right where he had been standing. Look, Kakashi-sensei, I know that you are irritated, but trying to kill me to soothe your problems with Kimi-chan will not solve anything. Naruto bit out sarcastically. Swinging around, he quickly caught the jonin's fist and flung him away. Smirking, he looked at the irate man and held up a very similar orange book that he had swiped from the hip pouch of the seething copy nin. I think that I am just gonna give this to Kamiko and see what happens. Naruto taunted and darted off back towards the clearing, not even bothering to look back. He knew that the nin was following, and that was all that he needed. As he skidded through the clearing, he tossed a book towards his lifelong companion and then darted out of sight. Kakashi, on the other hand, froze at the sight of his beloved book being burned for a second time in one day by the same person. He was literally seeing red, and if anyone asked him later what he was thinking that day, he would never have been able to answer. Pulling a kunai from his holster, he prepared for the coming attack and vowed to get even at the Red Deed for destroying his favorite piece of literature. Kamiko for her part just gave a foxy grin and vanished from his sight. Naruto and Hinata were sitting nearby, knowing not to get in the vixen's way. She may have been limited in what she could do, but she was more than strong enough to handle a washed-up jonin living in the past. Looking over at the heiress, Naruto felt a blush spread on his cheeks and allowed his mind to wander. He had really wanted to ask the girl out, but he wasn't sure how or if he would even be allowed to go on a date with her without exposing everything before he was ready. Trying to clear his head to focus on the battle before him, he flinched as the silver-haired nin quickly cleared a small trail through the greenery on the training field as a result of a very high-powered kick from a still grinning genin. Shaking his head once more, he focused on his parents. "Hey, Dad. How do you ask a girl out on a date and not get killed by an overprotective father?" he asked, making the incessant crying end. Minato blinked a couple of times and then allowed a huge grin to cross his face. His baby was already asking about dating. While he knew that he should be freaking out, he felt proud more than everything as it meant that the blonde was past most of the abuse he had been put through. Ask the father for permission first, otherwise there is no guarantee. Be polite, respectful, honest, and do not answer any questions the way that you think he wants them to be answered. State your true feelings. Hiashi respects honesty, and he will know that you truly are interested in Hinata. Minato replied, making Naruto groan. He had been afraid that his dad would say that. Bear in mind, Naru-chan, that the Hyuga clan is one that holds to tradition, and it used to be a requirement that the man asks for permission before trying to court or marry the girl, Kushina soothed, knowing that the boy was still terrified of the stern man's reaction to someone wanting to date Hinata. Before the blonde could reply, however, a massive explosion caught the attention of the observers, and Naruto's sweat dropped as Kamiko stepped up next to them holding the bells and smirking. We may not have training for a few days with Kakashi as he is in need of medical care. However, we can continue on with our individual training. She chirped, tossing the bells to the two gawking kids. Naruto looked back to where his sensei was and flinched at the extent of the damage. Minato, noting that he may be out for more than a few days without Tsunade around to fix him. Shrugging, Naruto offered to walk Hinata home, and then afterward he planned on taking a long bath before heading to bed himself. Nearby, several Anbu were gaping like fish as they dropped down next to the jonin and carefully, but quickly, carried him to the hospital. The Sandaime had asked them to observe the test, and they were certain that the Red was the devil in disguise. She had been playing with the jonin the whole time and enjoying it. We're doomed, was the collective thought. TBC, fresh start. It took Kakashi almost 2 weeks to heal even with the Iryo ninjutsu that the village possessed. Once he was released, however, another team meeting was called and the team met back on the training field. The group was quiet as they stared at each other. After nearly 10 minutes of silence, Kakashi finally spoke up. It seems as if we had a rather rocky start. So let's start over. My name is Hada Kakashi. I like reading and relaxing. I dislike traitors, cowards, and sweets. My hobby is reading. My dreamy don't really have one at the moment. He said, startling the group. Much better from the first one. It seems as if you had plenty of time to reflect. Kamiko stated, causing the jonin to twitch. It was true though. When he had regained consciousness, he had turned the encounter over in his mind repeatedly until he had come to the conclusion that the Red had been trying to tell him something. Afterward, he replayed the team meeting and realized how he must have come off to the group and why they reacted the way that they had. Then there was the talk he had with the Sandaime, which pretty much confirmed his theory. The genin had apparently been insulted by his approach to meeting them. Though they had a rather unique and violent way of showing it, the only thing that eluded him was the identity of the woman that fought on a level far higher than that of an Anbu. Yes, well, he did have plenty of time to think. He replied. My name is Kamiko. I like training with Naruto and Hinata, taking naps and walking in the forest. I dislike seals, confined spaces, obtrusive perverts, and arrogance. My hobbies are taking naps and planting Naruto's face on the ground while training. I only have one dream, but that I will not reveal until I trust you more. She introduced just as he had. They had truly been following his example before, hadn't they? Hyuga Hinata. I like cinnamon rolls, red bean paste, creating medicinal salves and flower pressing. I dislike the division in my clan, arrogance, the caged bird seal, and perverts. My hobbies are flower pressing, creating medicinal salves and spending time with my friends. My dream for the future is to discontinue the caged bird seal and reunite the clan as a true family. Kakashi nodded. She had a very challenging goal ahead of her. The clan would not allow any attempt to do away with what they saw as a necessary tradition. However, he felt that she would be able to succeed with the right support network. Uzumaki Naruto. I like pranking people, ramen, red bean soup and training with Hinata and Kamiko. I dislike traitors, cowards, perverts, and ignorance. My hobbies are training with Hinata and Kamiko and reading. My dream I wanted to be Hokage, but I am not sure if that was my mask or if I still want to do that. I am going to have to think about it some more. I do want to see my parents in person and get to know them better as a family," he said with a huge smile. Kakashi nodded and then blinked at the last sentence. "I thought that they were dead. What does he mean in person? Alright, I saw what the three of you were capable of already, so I am going to skip the second test. I want to know what you think your weaknesses and strengths are. I am pretty sure that my lack of control is the only weakness I have, but I haven't been challenged often, so I wouldn't know if I have any others," Kamiko replied. "Your temper." Naruto chirped, making the vixen sweat drop. She did have a rather nasty temper. "And that, I suppose." "I see. Hinata. My strengths are my control and herbal knowledge. I am getting much better in my taijutsu thanks to these two, and my reserves aren't that bad anymore. I still have some confidence issues and not a very good handle on ninjutsu. I am having some difficulty with learning Iryojutsu, though I really only have scrolls to learn from. I think the only other thing is my lack of knowledge on other forms of fighting and weaponry," Hinata said after a minute of contemplation. "Very good. You seem to have a lot in common in regards to your jutsu repertoire as the rest of your clan. However, unlike them, you are willing to expand your knowledge." Kakashi mused. "I am really bad at ninjutsu. I can dispel them, but not very well as it takes me a while to detect them. I am a decent sensor type and have a very advanced form of taijutsu. Despite this, I have yet to find a way to use my sensory abilities to improve my ability to sense ninjutsu. My chakra reserves are astronomical, but my control is still lacking. I have a massive repertoire of jutsu that I have mastered and a few that I know that I haven't mastered. I can be temperamental when I get frustrated and tend to irritate people unnecessarily. I have a high level of mastery with a variety of weapons and am still expanding on the ones that I can use," Naruto rattled off. The Jonin blinked at the boy in surprise. He had not expected that from him. Every one of his strengths seemed to be attached to one of his weaknesses. Overall though, he seemed to be well-rounded. "Very well then. Do the three of you know the tree climbing?" "Oh, you do? What about the water walking?" Their nod surprised him as he had not expected that from them. Humming, he looked at the three and sighed. "Do you know your chakra natures? If so, how far have you gotten in mastering them?" "I know mine is fire and I have perfect mastery over it," Kamiko said confidently. Kakashi raised an eyebrow at the vixen but shrugged it off. "I know that I have wind chakra, but I haven't really tested it in a long time, so I might have more. As for mastering it, I have the first step down, but I don't have access to a waterfall normally, so I can't go any farther," Naruto replied, causing the Jonin to lift an eyebrow. "I haven't tested mine yet," Hinata trailed off. Kamiko had said that she would be testing her types later that night, so she hadn't learned what hers was yet. Somehow, though, knowing that Naruto and Kamiko had not only learned theirs but had already completely mastered them, made her somewhat ashamed to be so far behind. "I see. In that case, I want all three of you to test your types again anyway. Well, you may have perfected your control of fire, you may have developed another affinity without knowing," Kakashi said, pulling 3 sheets of litmus paper from his vest. As the three took them, he watched intently to try and see if he couldn't get a clue as to Kamiko's true identity. He was so curious. As expected, Kamiko's paper nearly vaporized with how fast it went up in flames and turned to ash. "See, just fire," she said. "Not quite. There was a minor tear before it ignited. I think you are developing a wind nature as well," Kakashi countered, making the 9 tails blink in surprise. "Must be from all the time you spent in Naruto. With your chakra being exposed to so much fire-boosting elemental aligned chakra," Minato mused in the fox's head. Kamiko had to agree as there was no other reason that she could come up with to explain it. "Nice, Kimi-chan." Naruto cheered happily. Hinata's paper crinkled and then began to turn to ash. The reaction took even Kakashi by surprise, as both natures were considered highly offensive and Hinata seemed more of the defensive type. Lightning and fire. Interesting combination. That makes 3 fire types and 2 lightning types on the team, Kakashi commented with genuine interest. Hinata just blushed and said nothing. Kakashi-sensei, is it possible for someone to have all 5 elemental types?" Naruto asked almost sheepishly. The Jonin blinked at the odd question. "As far as I know, without certain Kekkei Genkai or continuous use of all of the chakra types, no." "Why do you ask, Naruto?" "I think my litmus paper was broken then," he replied. Another blink, this one in confusion, before Kakashi produced yet another sheet and handed it to the Jonin. "Try again." There was no way that it could be a fluke if the reaction occurred twice. Just as before, Naruto's paper ripped into 4 separate sections, each one reacting differently. No one could hide their shock, not even Minato. It was impossible without the Rinnegan or continuously using the various natures as Kakashi had previously said. Well, then I suppose that I was mistaken and it can happen, Kakashi said, the shock still evident. After a second he got a devious look on his face. Well, since we got off on the wrong foot and we are starting over, we will spend the next week or so training together. Then we will start taking missions together. Kakashi informed the team. But we have to take D ranks. Kamiko said, making the Jonin laugh. That is my decision. If I see that you will be able to handle yourself on higher missions right away and the four of us can work together at the end of the training, then no. If I sense some lingering problems, then yes. Kakashi confessed. Kakashi-sensei, I thought that the Sandaime was in charge of handing out the missions. Hinata queried in confusion. Well, that is true. I can recommend that we skip the lower ranked missions in order to better utilize your skills. The Jonin informed the team. Nodding and understanding, Team 11 got to work. A week and a half later, training for the team had been grueling. Despite the fact that Naruto and Kamiko were used to hard workouts, even the fox had to admit that when the Jonin got serious, he could wear even her out. Part of the problem was the form she was in, however. It had been so long since she had decided to take a human form that she had forgotten the limitations that they had. With most of her power still sealed inside of Naruto as well, she had severely underestimated her stamina. However, training with the Jonin was doing wonders to recover her former strength. She had not expected to have lost so much strength upon leaving the seal. Well, she supposed that was to be expected after 100 years of confinement and being torn in half. As the team met up on training field 7, Kakashi looked over the Genin with a bit of pride welling up. Despite their rough start, they had managed to come to an understanding and over the last week had come together as a functioning team. Whether or not they could keep their synergy going was another story. Alright then. After the last week and a half, I have watched as your skills grew and I must say that I am very impressed with the rate at which you learn. As such, I have decided that we will take a C-rank mission to begin with. However, the team's performance on the mission will decide whether or not we can continue to skip the boring missions. Furthermore, should a C rank not be available at the moment, we will be picking up a few D ranks instead, understood? Hi, Kakashi-sensei. Hinata and Naruto chorused. Kamiko merely groaned. She had no desire to do any C rank missions or D rank missions. However, she was aware that they were stepping stones needed in order to improve the level of Genin. As such, she would cooperate, for now. As the team headed towards the mission hall, they couldn't help but notice the weird looks that they were getting from everyone. Kakashi-sensei, why is everyone looking at us like that? Hinata asked a little meekly. There has never been a team that has waited so long to begin missions before, so they are curious as to why I haven't done this sooner. Don't worry, they are just being nosy. Kakashi said with an eye smile. The rest of the trip was done in silence, and as soon as they arrived they were greeted by the sight of Team 7 looking rather injured, annoyed and tired. After a few seconds, Kakashi chuckled and looked towards the other Jonin. Thora, Ibisu replied, trying not to laugh. The attitude that two of his team members had, as well as their lack of teamwork, was making simple missions rather difficult. As a result, he hadn't even considered the notion of taking a higher rank mission. Sandaime-sama, Team 11 reporting for their first mission, Kakashi told the older man before him. Hiruzen nodded. Despite knowing the challenges that Team 11 faced, he was surprised that it took this long for them to get a mission. I see. I was getting a little worried about the length of time that you were taking to come in. The man replied. Kakashi shrugged. He knew that many of the other shinobi were questioning his decision to wait so long. He really didn't care though. Your team must have needed a lot of work if you haven't even taken one mission yet. Kiba boasted despite his state. Naruto shrugged as he looked over the battered team before him. Your team still needs a lot of work if you can't handle a cat. Kamiko fired back. Kiba growled as he flinched. The cat must be a demon, of that he was sure. There was no way that a normal cat was that hostile or hard to catch. Now settle down. Kakashi admonished half-heartedly. Sandaime-sama, I would like to recommend that my team be allowed to take C-rank missions to start with on a trial basis. Should everything go smoothly on this mission, I would like to make the recommendation permanent. The Jonin said, the elder shinobi, making more than just a few jaws drop. Kakashi, considering the start that your team had, are you sure that they are ready to skip the D-rank missions? The Sandaime sputtered after finding his voice and regaining some composure. I understand that the team may not have had the best start and I recognize that the team may or may not be ready for such a level, however, I have spent the last week and a half with them for this very reason. They displayed higher than Chunin level tactics, teamwork, skills and a willingness to cooperate in order to achieve their goal while not sacrificing anyone during the team test. I think that if given the opportunity they may surprise even you. Kakashi explained. The room was left in an awkward silence as the Hokage considered the Jonin's words carefully. In all honesty, he wasn't comfortable sending Naruto out on any missions yet, especially since the stability of the new link between him and the Kyuubi had yet to be fully tested. He was worried that something would happen that would cause even further damage. At the same time, he knew that leaving the Kyuubi in the village and boring her would only cause more problems than it was worth. I believe that considering what the outcome of the test was, I will allow you to test them on a C-rank mission. However, if their performance is not satisfactory, then they will return to basic genin duties and lose their permission to do higher ranked missions for some time. Sarutobi finally said. Nodding in agreement, Kakashi knew that he was probably causing Ebisu some problems with Kiba and Sasuke, but in all honesty, he didn't care. He had, in his opinion, found the perfect team and he was fully intent on bringing out all of their potentials. Any preference in the type of mission? Preferably something that will allow me to test them properly. Bandit elimination would be acceptable. Kakashi replied. Nearby, Ebisu and several other shinobi blanched at the suggestion. Team 11 had been out of the academy for less than a month and yet he was already sending them to their first kills. More so, he intended for it to be their first mission. Well, we just happened to have one available. Just be careful, it is near the Kumo border. Hiruzen cautioned the silver-haired man. Taking the scroll from the leader, Kakashi read it quickly and nodded. Pack your gear for at minimum 2 weeks and make sure to bring a few extra weapons. While it is highly unlikely, we may be confronted by shinobi. While I doubt that they would come so far into High no Kuni considering the state of our relationship, there is always a possibility. We will meet at the gate and leave in 1 hour. He commanded. His genin nodded as they left the room to gather their supplies. I'll take my leave then, Hokage-sama, Kakashi said and then vanished in a poof of smoke. As soon as he was gone, Hiruzen could tell that he was going to get a headache. There was no way that he wasn't going to be bombarded with questions. Entering the Hyuga estate always made Hinata somewhat depressed. The division caused the compound to feel more like a prison than a home. As a result, she had found herself spending more time away from the building lately. The training sessions with Naruto and Kamiko were a blessing in disguise as it allowed her to spend most of the day away from home. Gathering her pack quickly, she headed to her father's study. Knocking lightly on the door, she waited for her father to grant her permission before entering. Dusan, Kakashi-sensei is taking us on a C-rank mission to deal with some bandits and I will be gone for at least 2 weeks. She informed the stern man quietly. Normally Hiashi would not have reacted, however, he was well aware that his daughter's team had yet to take a single mission and starting off on a C-rank, let alone a bandit elimination mission, was quite reckless. Any particular reason he decided to start off in such a manner? He said that he was confident that we could deal with it. He also said that he didn't feel like wasting the team's talent on D ranks if he could help it. She whispered. For some reason, she never could raise her voice any higher than a whisper with her father, no matter how much she tried. I see. Try not to disappoint the clan and hold your team back. He said without turning. Hinata nodded, biting her lip, and quickly left the room, sliding the rice paper door shut behind her. Turning to move down the hall, she nearly ran into her cousin, Niji. Omen, Niji Nai. She whispered before darting around him. Glaring at her retreating figure, he continued down the hallway without a word. There was no way that her Jonin would be taking her on a mission outside of the village so soon. Surely she was heading to a survival exercise with her team. Either way, it didn't matter to him as she would always be a failure. It didn't take long for Naruto and Kamiko reached the Uzumaki estate and began packing their belongings. It was done mostly in silence as the blonde considered the mission that they had been assigned. There was no way to interpret the word elimination in any way to mean anything other than kill. While he knew that he would be required to do so in the future in order to revive his parents, he had not expected it to happen so soon. His stomach was in knots and he didn't know if he would be capable of taking someone's life so soon. Naruto, calm yourself. There is a reason that genin are assigned to these missions. It is to prepare you for the future. It would have happened eventually and it is best to get it out of the way quickly in case the need arises further down the line. This way you are not taken off guard by it, Minato informed his son. He knew that the words would have little effect, but he honestly did not know what else to do. Mentally he made a note to knock Kakashi into the ground once he was brought back into the real world. Even he thought that it was too soon for this kind of mission. I know, Dad, but it is nerve-wracking to think that I will be killing someone so soon. I don't know if I can, Naruto admitted. He always knew that as a shinobi he would eventually be required to kill, but he had always hoped that he wouldn't have to for a long while. Naru-chan, if you don't, you could be endangering the lives of your comrades. Keep that in mind during the fight. Also, try to remember that the bandits have caused much harm and maybe even death to many people before you get to them. It will ease some of the hesitations, his mother soothed. Naruto nodded to himself and then cursed, looking around. Himi-chan, do you know where my katana is? He called out to his lifetime companion. It should be next to your kunai and shuriken. She called back. Glancing around where his aforementioned weapons were, he groaned and began searching behind the stand and under it as well. Shrugging, he picked up his pack and grabbed his sickle instead. Despite that, he felt off without the katana he had been training with for the last 3 years. The same katana that his mother used when she was a genin. Nodding to himself and shaking his head clear of the distractions, he headed out of the room and down the hall, vowing to find the blade later. He knew that it was still in the house as no one but Hinata could get in without their consent. The door closing behind him left a hollow sound that reflected his inner thoughts and feelings. TBC. What if Naruto drops the act bashing naruhina? Thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.